Hi, everybody. Welcome. This class is Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. And so many apologies if any of you were confused because I know I sent out my link to the class last night, but sometimes there are mysterious techno gremlins that prevent things from going through. So I'm very glad that people alerted me and I have sent things out. And if you arrive a little bit late to class, I understand today and I'll make sure to try to touch the buttons and make sure that you can enter. Okay, good. So I've got my wonderful, clipboard here to be able to prepare everything. And actually in my reveries when I was waking up this morning, and I sometimes have clarity and like introspection and retrospection, I was really thinking about how much the powers that I fight against and that you guys fight against as well, how much they really do not want us to be able to not only communicate effectively, but communicate about these topics. Like sometimes, in my struggles, I razz them, like, trash talk on the basketball courts and then, like yo mama and things like that. And I'm like, yes, really acknowledging that in spite of all of their efforts and really throwing the kitchen sink at me or at us as a class, we still assemble against all odds in order to be able to use our cognitive abilities, use our divine connection, and explore topics and talking about things that really are considered like a direct threat, an existential threat to the harmful government that is in our world. So like, we're not talking about, some type of violent overthrow. We're literally talking about transforming the world and becoming more empowered through perception. So just please know this is an acknowledgement of how profound the work is and how important it is to be able to talk about these things, that there are great efforts made to either dilute the message or make it more difficult for you to think or to know or to perceive it. So thank you all for your bravery and nobility and courage at coming to class to be able to talk about these things. Like, just imagine, like, we have this giant, swirling and chaotic energy all around us with all these things, whatever, arrows arranged to vector at us. And we're like, okay, get going with the clipboard. Let's talk, everyone. Okay, good. So that's my contextualization. Good job at being in class and just being here and listening. And today what I'm going to talk about is non-duality, or duality in perception. And I do have a lot of personal qualms at the way that non-duality is spoken about, referenced, or described in culture right now. I'm going to talk about it in reference to flying rainbow lasagna. Sometimes because I'm interested in non-duality, and there might be like a book or a conference on it, and I look at it and I'm like, that is not what I'm talking about at all. So please, just as I separate like the word singularity from how others might contextualize or define this word, I also define non-duality specific to the flying rainbow lasagna and to this class. So please receive it in that way, because I'm not talking about some kind of an erasure between distinctions or some kind of a negation between the polar opposites of good and evil. All of that being said, now we can talk as the experts and very intelligent people in this class to be able to explore this concept. So the concept is, through mastering what the singularity or singularity is in this shape and comprehending that this shape is the dynamic shape of this shape, where both of these two tie together, there is not two singularities. There's only one singularity, and it's in different positions. And when it's in different positions, it has different qualities. So this is also the part in class when I teach you about the little ant walking on the inside and the outside surface. And this is also the part in class where I emphasize that where my pen is wiggling is no space. So I use this sculpture as a type of convention. And sometimes when I've made it out of like, a flimsy silk or something like that, I have to have a pole in the middle to kind of like hold things together. And in many of my drawings, you see either a line or a dotted line that connects this area to this area. And I think that maybe in your visual mind, you think or you interpret, oh, the singularity travels, like here it is here, and then it goes like do, 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 and then it ends up here. That is not what it does. So wipe all of that out of your mind. What the singularity does is it goes through a portal. It is down here, and then in order to get up here, it goes through a portal. And the portal does not go in here. It bypasses in here. In here, where I'm wiggling my finger, is a convention, and it is not actually a place that exists within this sculpture. Similarly, when energy is flowing around the lobes or these petal shapes, the energy does not go into where my finger is wiggling. Like if I'm going to look at yellow energy, and yellow energy is going across this area of the surface of what we would call the outer surface here, what is happening is it gets to the edge and then it goes into a portal. And as it goes into a portal, it skips this area where I'm wiggling my finger and it emerges over here. And then it transits around this area of the skin of the torus and it skips where my pen is wiggling and it emerges over here. So when you look at the flying rainbow lasagna as experts in this class, please start to consider that this whole area along this curved edge is a portal. And it's not the edge of a cliff. When you get there, you go through a door and you skip all of this empty space in here and you come out over here. Okay. And this is time. So now let's talk about the concept of time as the ever expanding bubble of the little ant. And then I'll get into my notes and I'll send out my notes and correct whatever you didn't receive because of techno gremlins. So I don't believe in the Big Bang, but it is a cultural convention in your world at this moment. And it is an effective starting point to be able to talk about these things. So the convention is to consider that everything began as a highly compressed form of potential with nothing around it. That's the Big Bang. And then something magical happened and it started to expand. And as it expanded, it created what we know as time. And the expansion could be considered a bubble. And the outside of the bubble is the moment now. Again, I don't agree with this, and there's lots of problems with it. You're like, Aurora, why are you giving us something that has problems? And I'm like, it's a good starting point, and the visual of a Tootsie Roll center at the Tootsie Pop with outer candy shell is effective for us. So please know that everything going from the candy shell of the Tootsie Roll or the outer skin of the balloon to the interior would be considered the past to you. And here in this studio where I have, where I'm coming to you, I'm like going into the past. I always put my arm back there. It's like back there where I do my painting, that's the past, right? And then moving towards you, that would be like the future. This is all linear time that I'm talking about. And linear time has everything to do with your perception, which is dualistic. And it's dualistic because you have two eyes. Most of you, some people might be different. And so I'm happy if you have different eyesight. But most people have two eyes, eye one and eye two, build a viewpoint of the world. And this is a biological convention and a starting point from your own calibration of how things are in the world that then colors your expectation of everything. So let's start off with your visual acuity as being related to a contrast on your retina. The way that you, so like if I had a class full of bumblebees, I would be teaching my class differently because I would be talking to bumblebees that have composite eyes. And I would have to talk about how each of their beautiful eyes creates a type of mosaic. I know where my little crystal is, but I have a little crystal that's shaped just like that. Multifaceted crystal mosaic, and how your bee eyes have to put together a picture of over 100 images to be able to make a picture of the world. But I am not talking to a audience of bees. I'm talking to an audience mostly of humans, and you guys have binocular vision, where you're pretty much combining two different viewpoints of the world. In case you don't think that you're good at math, claim it and define yourself as someone who's good at math because you're doing these complex calculations all the time. And this is what little children are doing when you're a tiny infant or even whatever up to like kindergarten age. Little children are learning how to calibrate their vision to tell like how far away is something. If I reach for something, where is it in space? And this is important so that way you can like whatever, get a cup of milk and drink it or catch a ball or anything like that. So you have to be able to do these complex visual calculations that are based upon the slight differences between the position of one eye and the position of the other eye. But it goes even deeper than that. Beyond your binocular vision, there's the action on the retina of these different retina cells, where you can imagine like one hand is some cells and one hand is another cell, and they are stimulated by a photon. And like if these guys are stimulated by a photon, they will send signals to the brain, but these guys will not. And then your brain literally builds a picture of the world based upon this inner contrast. So if you're looking at my face on your screen, you're human, not a bumblebee. You draw a picture of the world by being like, okay, here's light, 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 but then here's dark. Look at the difference between this color here and this color here. These are two separate things. We have face versus no face. Face versus no face. And this is the original thing that your mind and your body does from the time when you were a little baby. Because when you're a little baby, everything is just a big giant blur. And I joke about this, but like, you don't know what the F is going on, and shapes move, and there are these crazy things that are going on, and then something goes in your mouth. Like, that's being a little baby. But at a certain point, your visual system can comprehend the raw materials of what you're being given, and you're able to draw a picture. For most people, the first thing that you recognize is a face. Someone is there. Face. Person versus no person. Face versus no face. And this is like the origin of the wiring or structuring of your brain system. And then you go around from that moment onward in your life looking for faces. And you might even find them like in the grain of wood, you know, on a closet door or any place. Like, you'll see faces everywhere because it is literally part of how your perception is created. So there's no judgment there. Understand it or comprehend and accept it and celebrate it as an innate part of your biological behavior. And it is really the limit, and you have to move beyond that limit in order to get to your higher faculties. So last week in class, I shared that little drawing that I have of the higher faculties, where you see, like, you know, energy field coming out from the heart, and you see how the your brain and your brain stem and your pineal gland and your eyesight, your inner sight, all balances upon that. So that is the key extra part of your anatomy that you must either awaken or come to awareness of in order to move beyond binocular vision. And then you have a third option. It's called your third eye, and it gives you a third viewpoint to be able to comprehend, sorry, I said that wrong, to be able to comprehend multi-dimensional reality. Sorry about that, because definitely sometimes my brain's going way faster than my mouth. So let's talk about something like binary. It's math. So just like, you strap yourselves in. Feel like, okay, I will not run away. So this is the concept of being able to represent any number as either a 0 or a 1. And it's part of the basics of computational theory and how modern day computers are made. Basically, there's either a little tiny switch or, like, you know, a little tiny thing in a microchip that either has an on switch or an off switch. These are opposites. You're either on or you're off. You're black or you're white. Like, the 0 is nothingness and the 1 is somethingness. So you're like, okay, there's either nothingness or somethingness, nothingness or somethingness. And the digits that are used to represent that, again, are like the number 0 and the number 1. But let's count, everyone. This is math class, and it's easy. Don't run away. All right, here's one digit, the 0. And what's this one? This was 2. How many digits do I have? Let's go through that again. This, 1. And then this one, 2. Wait, I have 2 things. So although I only have the symbolic representation for nothingness and somethingness, those are 2 things that are represented. So you don't have symbols within the binary system to be able to represent 2, but you have 2. It's implied in there, all right? So once you can make that cognitive leap where you're like, wait a minute, there's a whole number that's implied in this system, but it's not actually spoken about, and we don't have a symbol for it, but it's there and it's doing stuff, then you can move beyond that. And this is exactly like comprehending and mastering the 90-degree angle that is the cognitive leap, or leap into the next generation not next generation, the leap into the next level of reality from where you presently are. So multi-dimensional viewpoint from linear viewpoint, multi-dimensional experience of time from linear experience of time, non-dualistic experience of self from dualistic experience of self. And a lot of what I was teaching you about the refinement of your personality characteristics as you are learning to navigate this space, like the idea of which songs are the real you, which are not the real you. How are you learning to focus your definition of self towards the central core timeline and away from the peripheral bad math or errors or miscalculations or places where you're exploring aspects that aren't the real you, things that aren't the real you or behaviors that aren't the real you. And all of that is a comparison or dualistic way of navigating through the world. Like you can imagine, again, I get my diamonds, darling, my diamonds. So you have your diamond here in your head, and it's your pineal gland, and you're kind of like that game, hot and cold. Like, okay, am I going towards ascension? Hotter, hotter, hotter. I'm getting towards ascension. Oh, no, now I'm going in the wrong direction. Cold, 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 going in the wrong direction. So you kind of use that as your literal guidance system to be able to determine if you're going down the right time road. Are you making choices that bring you towards the refinement of your consciousness, continued life, greater levels of divine connection, and greater levels of wisdom? Or are you diluting your consciousness, diluting your intelligence, moving away from benign and divinely inspired characteristics and moving towards distortion or non-life affirming characteristics? And so that's a comparison. But going in the right direction versus the wrong direction. And that is an appropriate form of navigation for you in a linear world. But as you start to become multidimensional and you experience time non-linearly, the movement towards benign personality characteristics is similarly a non-linear movement. But this is not to equate all characteristics as being the same. I'm not trying to say evil, schmeevil, it's all in the soup. No, that's very much not what I'm trying to say. And so I'm very clear at never wanting to be misinterpreted as I describe non-duality, which is kind of like, why I'm going to get a drink of water here. So I'm ducking off camera. But look, I came prepared with a whole giant amount of water. Why I'm a little bit critical of more simplistic or maybe like ethnocentric definitions of what non-duality is, because some of it does just kind of do evil schmeevil. Kind of like put it all in the same bin, paint it all with the same brush. Why even make a distinction between these two things? So when I teach about and flying rainbow lasagna specifically, have to emphasize this is not to just put everything in the same bucket. This does not simply equate a 0 with a 1 and say they're exactly the same, or to equate light with dark. Like here's light on my face and here is dark on the side over here. They are not the same. They're qualitatively different. Same thing with your characteristics. Moving towards optimum timelines is not equitable to moving away from optimum timelines and towards the membrane of death. Okay. So when I talk about flying rainbow lasagna and the recombination of formerly dualistic or oppositional positions, it is a selective bringing together of these former opposites. Not to say that there is no difference between them. You continue to observe the distinction between them, but you can bring them together. Like Aurora, my brain is already liquefied. Keep going. Let's not stop. So let's go to a picture. This will help you to further liquefy your brains. All right. This is, I think, one of the best drawings I've ever done. It's not a very complex drawing. Let me also just X this out so that it's not distracting for you. There we go. So this is not a very complex drawing, which is why you might be surprised if I say this, because it's like there are definitely some that I've done that have a lot more lines and have a lot more stuff that's going on. But this is really important because of the amount of truth that it really shows to you. So here you have a cross-section of a torus at the top, or a cross-section of a donut at the top, and also a cross-section of a donut at the bottom. It's actually the same donut. So I'm showing it to you in this image as if first it's up above and then it's down below. Kind of like when you have a multiple exposure of a person and they're throwing a baseball or something like that, and you see many, many, many versions of their arm going across the screen, but you know they only have one arm. It's a multiple exposure. And the key point to comprehend on this drawing is that up here where I place the cursor, that is singularity. And then also here where I place the cursor is singularity. Those are two positions of singularity. And where I'm moving the cursor right now, that area does not exist. It does not go do, 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 and then it goes over to here. It goes over here and it jumps through a doorway and it totally skips everything and then comes out here. And then it goes through a doorway again, skips everything, and comes over to here. So that's one crucial thing to comprehend. You have to add that with your mind because you're looking at a picture that is a static image. So just like with the optical illusion in class that I liked showing you, the old lady, the young lady, you are using your perception when looking at this drawing or piece of artwork to add another dimension to be able to comprehend what is really going on here. You're looking at a type of movement, all right? And when the torus, let's just begin with the lower torus. When it is in this position over here, singularity is creating this type of cleft that goes down like that. That is a direct outgrowth of the vector of consciousness. So it is like the movement of your consciousness towards singularity in that direction is what causes that puckering or gathering of the fabric of space-time. But then when the singularity is in this other position, the gathering or the folding or like the ruffled nature of the fabric of space-time is being drawn in this direction. And it is that oscillation between what we define as up and down or position one and position two that ends up creating this shape that I showed to you that is called flying rainbow lasagna. So it is created by the singularity jumping down, jumping up, jumping down, jumping up. The place where the cursor is right now is never occupied. That is another dimension. It is a different space. And you can also see these arrows because as the energy is rolling along the outside surface of the skin of the torus, that's where all the math calculations are happening. It goes around like this, and then it goes to the center line, and then it goes up like this. So there's like an S curve, like a down and an up. But you can see like for the orange, what I was telling you, this S curve ends here, and then it jumps. It jumps over to here, goes out of a door over here and into a door over here, and then it goes across like this, then it goes out of a door over there, and then it would jump to a door that's over here and make a S curve that's like this. So you're looking at many multiple doorways or portals where this aspect is jumping back and forth. And when you look at Flying Rainbow Lasagna, this is the overall end result of this jumping back and forth portal. Okay, so now let me go back to, we're going to talk a lot about the hardware of your actual eyesight, how your actual eyes work. And even beyond having two eyes that compare a view of the room and also having retina cells that compare levels of stimulation with one another, you also have a visual tendency that is called persistence of vision. And that is the truthful nature that you are looking at static images of reality, which you are then connecting together through a type of cognitive integument to create a motion-filled picture of the world. Because the world does not look like to you like an old-fashioned movie like from Charlie Chaplin in the early 1900s. Everything was jerky like this and things didn't look quite right. Because, okay, now we're in film history class. You're like, oh, God, got out of math class. It's so much cooler now. Okay, let's talk about your favorite movies. No one watches movies from the silent golden age of Hollywood. Those are not your favorite movies. But way back in that time, they had not yet perfected the frame rate of movies. They had choppy looking movies because they didn't have the frame rate moving fast enough to be able to accommodate this aspect of your vision that is called persistence of vision. So now let's go back even earlier to the time of the earliest animations. This is known as the zoetrope. And this is maybe like from the dark ages, like the year 1000 BC up to like the year 1500 BC. This is when this was first explored as a type of magic. If you could imagine taking like a barrel or something that is a rounded cylinder that has very regular slits cut in it and get that sucker spinning like around a spindle, and then having something like a piece of paper that you draw animation cells. Yes, everyone is thinking about their flip book. Okay, did you do this in your math book when you were bored in class in like third grade or something like that? You had a fat math textbook like this, and in the edge, you can draw like a little stick figure. And then on the next page, another little stick figure, and you can make its arm go up and down or something like that. Yes, flip book. These types of ancient crude animation function because what your mind does is takes a snapshot of reality. And then a second, not even a full second later, it is actually a 10 to the 30-second portion of reality, known as the Planck length. Later, a tiny, tiny, tiny slice of time later, your mind takes another snapshot of reality and it draws the picture between them to fill in the blanks. So your mind is doing a lot of things. You're calculating left eye versus right eye. Your mind is also filling in the blanks of your blind spot, which is as you have your fovea, your focal point, which is where mostly you're looking at stuff through your focal point. Then you have your periphery, but then you have your blind spot. And it's like, it's somewhere over here somewhere. And you can't see anything there, but your brain fills in the blanks. So you don't really have a problem because your brain is kind of like, oh yeah, like there's some crap over here. And just, don't follow the hole or whatever. So please know, like, you're making up a lot of stuff. You're fabricating a lot of stuff, even as you're just trying to figure out and navigate the vagaries of the five senses realm. But then on top of that, you add so much stuff that you add an entire dimension, and the dimension is called the dimension of motion. So let's use the lasagna as an example. So here on your screen, and we'll talk the difference between video and film as well. But here on your screen, you're watching like a video refresh. So it goes refresh from like the top of the screen along like this. It's very different than the old-fashioned way of doing this, which was one whole image at a time. Image, duh. Image, duh. I know the thumbnail is going to be from that. It's going to look so dumb. But anyway, so let's say you have something like this that's moving across your screen. It's here, then it's here, then it's here, all right? And what your mind and your brain are really doing is seeing a static image here. This thing is here. Then you see it here, but you fill in all of this stuff here. And then you see it over here, and you fill in all of this stuff here. So these are tendencies of your mind and your brain and your interpretation system to fill in the blanks of reality or to create a coherent interpretation of the raw materials that you are being presented by. But please know that it's not the only correct interpretation, and it's only one level of reality interpretation. And as you start to get into higher dimensional reality, you will start to add even additional degrees of dimensionality, interpretation, and freedom to reality, and you will begin to perceive through truly multidimensional eyes. So, okay, first let's talk about when they started to improve the frame rate. That was, let's say, in the 1930s and the 1940s. They figured out if you flash an image 26 times a second, most people's eyes can blend that together to make it look like a smooth motion. That was considered to be like some type of magic, because then it looked like real life, right? Even though you know that it fools your senses. It's a projection on a flat screen. Then upward from there, like in the 1960s and 1970s, they started to do hyper-realistic super slow motion, which is also how you got a lot of food commercial stuff. So it was one of those things where it was actually invented for high-class stuff like NASA, but then it was dumbed down for the proletariat. So in the 1970s, you start to see these commercials that are like a jug of syrup, and it's pouring, and it goes like glug, 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 like the syrup flows so voluptuously. How do they get that? And the answer is the very, very fast frame rate. As you increase the speed of the film that is filming, get more than 26 frames per second, and you capture hyper-realism, more information. The faster that the camera is moving its film, the more information you capture. So in the case of the syrup or the chocolate going glug, 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 you can see like every bubble, like every motion of the surface. It looks so voluptuous and so amazing. It was mostly used for food because it activated your senses so much. But This is also how you can comprehend and relate to the ascension process, that you begin to accelerate your inner speed of perception to the point that you are moving faster than the more traditional 10 to the 32nd Planck length frame rate. And as you start to move at a faster rate, you can perceive more in each moment. Most people equate this faster inner frame rate to ingesting some type of a psychedelic molecule. But that is not the only way to open your doors of perception, a la whatever, the doors of perception and Aldous Huxley or something like that. I bring up not only him, because he's one of the famous guys, but also the poet Blake, because he wrote that poem that says, it's called Auguries of Innocence. And he talks, sorry if I'm not quoting it correctly, about experiencing eternity in an hour. And that is the essence of what psychedelics or these particular molecules can do, to temporarily give you a boost and increase your frame rate so that in an hour, you might be experiencing or perceiving or ingesting the amount of available information that you might have experienced in 24 hours, in a whole entire day, or in a whole entire week. And so what that feels like when you're in those mind states, and again, it doesn't have to be from taking a drug, it can be from your own artistic merit, but when you're in those accelerated rates, you feel and sense everything. So right now, at the speed that I'm moving, I feel like my feet are walking on the treadmill and I'm looking at you guys and, I'm talking and flap my moving mouth parts. But if I were to super accelerate, I would be like, I can see, like, there's a strawberry plant outside of my window. There's a ladybug on top of the strawberry. The ladybug's antenna is going like this. And also at the same time, whatever, there's a microbe over here. And I hear there's water running over there. Like, it can be very, very sensory overwhelming because you have to process all of the things that you are receiving, even in one moment. So it's 2:32 p.m. and I'm like, okay, ladybug is waving its antenna. I'm walking on a treadmill. That guy's touching his glasses. Like, these are all the things that are happening. And when you are accelerated, and I keep using that word, but when you're moving at these faster speeds and moving towards light speed, what happens is you can personify or embody more energy. You can comprehend more things at once. Literally, to use a computer analogy, your RAM or your processing power is more. You can know and comprehend more things in a moment than you could have known otherwise. And if you want to know really like my definition of God or of divinity, it is that ultimate acceleration to the point of infinity where you are at the center of this sculpture and you have access to infinity. You have access to everything. So instead of you have like one picture at a moment, and your brain kind of tying things together and also, making a story about what it is, you have all pictures of all moments at once. And then you create a cognitive picture of the world based on all of those pictures at once. So here's a good analogy to help you to comprehend that. With old-fashioned film, and we'll get into video and the refresh rate of video, you were given one frame, subsequent frames. And let's talk about the editing process. Like the frames are in a line. You have a film strip where it's all curled up. And here's one reel and here's another reel, and then it goes past the lens. Here's the part in the middle. But what if you were to you're like the editor of a film, and you're going to take everything off of the reels. So you just have one big, giant, long line of stuff. And you're like, oh, you mean like chromatin in your DNA? And I'm like, exactly, smart students, exactly like chromatin. But let's also imagine that you have this long, ribbon of information, and you're going to chop it up so that it's individual frames representing, one slice of time at a time. And you're going to lay it out kind of like on a table. You're going to start with scene one when you get born over here, and you're going to lay out every single viewpoint of every single moment all the way up to the end of your story. This is your death, final moment over here. And when you have everything laid out on the editing room table like that, then you can start to see overarching patterns that you can't see when you're in the moment. Like you can look at it and you can look at your whole entire life and you can be like, oh, like let's look at every time I wore a red sweater, like Christmas, here, 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 here. You start to see commonalities and repeated themes. And when you have the editing view, you also have the sense that this is one arrangement of potentials in your life. But let's say, just like a film editor, you're going to change one thing in the story. Instead of meeting Mrs. Right over here, you met a different girl. And then everything after that moment changed. You're like, no, I didn't meet my wife here. I met a different girl. And then all of these scenes changed. And you had a different version of reality. So it was same from birth up until you met your wife. Everything was the same, but then you had a branching change in reality. And you might have still worn a red Christmas sweater, red sweater, red sweater, red sweater, but with a different wife. And then you start to see from the multidimensional viewpoint how these either small or very large and meaningful life choices create changes in the multifaceted expression of what your life can be. So in the class when I was teaching you about your central core timeline and peripheral vision, and I said, you know, there are, when you're meeting someone who is in distress, like they're a drug addict, they're a shambling, crazy homeless person, raving on, you know, in the middle of a highway, like, you know, that song that I quoted, like, you know, a wild-eyed prophet raving in the middle of the highway and shaking his fist and saving you. Like that's one version of that guy on drugs and crazy, but there's another version of that guy, you know, where he really made something out of his life. And like that's a bit simplistic because it also tends to normalize or equate everyone out as having the same potential. And I don't think that everybody has the same potential. So you can't just think that, and it's too simplistic to be like, oh yeah, like Adolf Hitler wasn't so great on this timeline, but if you just met him on a better timeline, he would have been a better person. But it is much more apt and much more accurate to say that all of these characteristics and potentials from the far periphery to the center, the non-diluted, focused center of who you are, all of that adds up to your multidimensional self. Okay. So instead of starting to think like, oh, like that version of me that is, you know, raving in a parking lot somewhere is not the real me. It is the real you. And it adds up to the overall flavor of you. Like if you were to look at the version of your life movie where you married this girl and then went on to have this future, that adds up to one facet of who you are. But then you have a different edit of the movie, married a different girl, different lead actress. The movie went differently. Or one edit of the movie where you didn't get married at all. All of those versions of your life or versions of the movie of you add up to your true self in exactly the same way that all of these colors from red all the way up through violet add up to the true color of you, your personality, which is white light. So in additive color mixing, now we're back in art history and art, but also in photography and film history. When you do additive color mixing, that is the type of things that happen with light waves, not with pigments of paint. And the light waves add together. If I were to take all the paint in my art studio and pour it into a bucket, I would not get white. I would get like a brown, murky, very gross color, because that is subtractive color mixing, where everything adds up to like brown or black or murky, gross colors. But when you're working with pure light waves and you balance the recipe and you have all of these colors come together, they make beautiful, pure white light. So that would be like if you're doing stage lighting, if you've ever worked with that, where you have like a green light, a red light, and a blue light, and they all beam together onto someone's face and it looks white, right? Or traditional printing where you have transparent inks. And this is like old-fashioned cartoons, like whatever, Blondie and Dagwood or something like that, that cartoons that are in the newspaper. To get those colors, they have additive mixing. They color up. So this is cyan, yellow, and magenta. And those are the origins of color mixing. I know we're doing a lot here today. We're doing lots of optical truth about nature and having that apply to your life. So All of these versions of your life are like transparent overlays. And when you have the multidimensional view of your existence, you see all of these films at once. And you see all of the life decisions that you have made through a unifying lens. And all of those things help to add up to and to give formfulness to your soul. So instead of denying them and saying, those peripheral versions are not the real me, they are the real you, but they are the real you that might be like an underpainting or a background color, not the foreground of who you really become. So now we're back in art class. Okay, when you do traditional oil painting, I don't have a paintbrush here. Oh, here's a paintbrush. When you do traditional oil painting, what you do is you do not begin with the color of a person's skin, like, kind of an orangey peachy color. You begin with an underpainting, and it could be blue or green or purple, where you don't use a valid color at all. You just start with lights and darks. Like, oh yeah, like here's some dark area over here, and then some dark area over here, dark area, and then you let it dry. And then you add extra layers and extra layers on top of it. The underpainting does not really show because at a certain point you've added the orange colors of the skin and the colors of highlights that show that light is bouncing off. But the underpainting does give a type of depth and helps to make something look like it's not a flat object on a flat page. These are tools of the trade. It's the same thing with your peripheral life exploration and experiences. That's you painting your vision and your version of yourself, sometimes using outlandish colors that aren't the real you, but they do add to the underpainting or the foundational nature of who you are. And they do explore or speak to what the final image really does look like. So that's also important to create a distinction where it's not just like you have, I'm trying to think of the right words. I want to say a free reign or disposability in the peripheral timelines, because I talked about that movie that is Groundhog's Day, where at a certain point the character does go through existential dread, and he's like, nothing matters. His shoulders are down. He's like, nothing matters. Like, eat a cupcake for breakfast, jump off a bridge, nothing matters. But that's underpainting. That's actually underpainting of his exalted self-realization. So those things did matter. And I want for you to comprehend that the decisions that you're making at all of these different levels of reality and layers of your life, they matter. They're not disposable. And that you should take them seriously because they do add up to the definition of self, even if they aren't in the overt top layer that you end up comprehending as yourself. Okay. Don't worry, I'm being very nonlinear. So now we're going back to the concept of the Big Bang and the concept of the little ant. And I have to go back to the image that I was sharing with you. Okay, so in the concept of the Big Bang, let's just look at one of these circles here and I'll get a little color. Um, in the concept of the Big Bang, this little ant is in the past. Let's draw some antenna. That little guy is on the inside of the surface, right? And he's walking along and he goes, do, 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 do. And let's draw this guy over here. This is an ant that's on the outside of the surface of time. And he walks along and goes like this, do, 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 do. But these two guys can never talk to each other. They're separated by one which is experiencing the present and moving into the future, and one that is the end result of the past. And this represents the key distinction between your linear mind. Once you start to draw a distinction in duality of this thing versus this thing, or light versus dark, or this potential versus this potential, there is a separation. There is not a unity. When I teach you about flying rainbow lasagna, this becomes the selective and highly measured and calculated reunification of things that were held separately. So the truth is that the little ants have a unification in their experience of time, but that the mind definition of experience that is defined by your mind and your linear mind is saying, no, that little ant happened to the past, and I'm the ant of the moment now, and then these are all the ants of the potentials of the future. Sorry, fucking silly. But yes, there's a separation. When you start to do the flying rainbow lasagna, the singularity, jumping from the upper position to the lower position, makes the formerly distinct realms of the outer membrane and the inner membrane communicate. And they don't communicate entirely. So it's not like an entire smooshing where you're going to take the entire surface of the inside and the entire surface of the outside and bring them together. Going to selectively combine them or overlap them or make transit points where those two things can communicate. And that is the essence of what flying rainbow lasagna is. So it is the higher dimensional state or the higher dimensional version of what you've been doing or experiencing in a linear experience of time. Just as you can consider that you can accelerate and have a different subjective experience of time and experience eternity in an hour, or see heaven in a grain of sand, or however that beautiful poem goes, you also can begin to comprehend that through the cultivation of your perception, you start to perceive multidimensionally, and you start to have connections between who you are on this timeline or in this descriptive version of reality and who you are on other timelines and other descriptive versions of reality. And that is what non-duality is. You don't just have a 0 and a 1 or an off position and an on position. You begin to achieve the next additional degree of freedom or the next thing that you can do, which is to do a third thing. You don't just have I1 and I2, you have I3, which is your inner eye. And your inner eye is directly tied to psychic perception, but it is also tied to your experience of time. So first, you should know that your experience of time is largely acculturated and not natural, and that acculturalization process is what separates you from other animals. Other animals do know and mark the passage of time and remember time, but they remember it differently. So how plants who are perennials and annuals remember time is different from you because of how they internalize what has happened in one season in order to prepare their metabolism for the next season. So that's different than you. I'm having trouble organizing my brain. Organisms that form asexual reproduction, such as the flatworm, the planaria, passes along its information from generation to generation. So they do not have a distinct sense of self, like the version of them that was 3 generations ago. Like they are not distinct as you are. You're like, that was my grandma. I am different from grandma. She was 3 generations ago. The planaria does not have separate distinctions in its identity as to the outgrowth of what it came from and also what it will become. So again, we're looking at the vagaries or tendencies that arise from the biological container and considering how that colors your expectation of who you will be or what you will experience. Hold on a second. I'm just going to look to my notes. Okay, so critical things in resolving duality, the moment of jumping from the 0th dimension into the 1st dimension, examining that first critical architecture, because that also relates to the concept of Big Bang, even though, again, we're just kind of exploring it like as something that's easy to talk about, but it's not really truthful. But the sense that Big Bang talks about the initial highly compressed potentiality of everythingness, and then the expansion into dimensionality. And what you experience, the 0th dimension is a similar analog, an infinity point that contains everything. And again, like when you are at that level of acceleration, you contain everything, including the things that you don't contain. And that might be confusing, but I'm happy to liquidate your brains. So yes, at singularity, and when you are moving at the infinite, center of fastness and beyond light speed that you can possibly encompass and be, You are everything and you have access to infinity, and infinity contains everything, including the subset of things that infinity does not contain. So when this is, let's say the lower position in my little picture, you're like, this is everything that exists. I'm currently experiencing the overlapping waveforms and the resulting color of all the transparent layers of reality of everything that exists. But then when this switches to this position up here, that is when you do not perceive everything that does not exist. And the nothing of no things that unbe and do not exist, unexist. And those two things are exemplified in the sculptural form of the lasagne. This is a concept, and then of course it becomes an embodiment. But when you're in this concept, you can comprehend one position is energy, and that's everything that exists, and the overarching layers of information of things that are there, that are things. Then there is the complement, which is the subset of stuff that does not exist. All the things that are not happening and all the things that will never happen. So these are important distinctions in your life and in the various multidimensional edits of your life. There's a particular grouping of all the things that ever happened. In my little description here, you get to this point in your journey and then like you marry someone. But you marry maybe this girl, that girl, this, always like this porcupine, this person, this blah, 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 or you don't get married. But there's actually a limited number of potential marriage partners, maybe whatever. There were 17 people and 17 different versions of reality, not an infinite version of reality. You did not marry everyone, including raving homeless people, at that moment in your life. Selectivity. So this is not, when we talk about non-duality and unity consciousness and the coming together of all these different versions of reality, it is not to say like that there's no difference, everything happens and there's no distinction. That is erroneous and like makes you feel like you want to throw up because not every flavor goes together. So in your life, there are certain people that were potential marriage partners, but not everybody who lived on the planet during the time that you were alive. This is such an important distinction to make because there's not, in the realm of everything that can happen, that is still a limited set of realities, not an infinite set of realities. And in that finite set of realities, there are some things that happen and that you would choose and that are fashioned for you or formed for you, but a lot of things that you would never choose and that are not formed for you. And that's the subset of things that never happen, or the no things that non-exist and they unbe and you never experience them. Those things are also at infinity. So it's like saying infinity contains all of the music that you play, the genuine notes that you play in reality, but it also contains all of the notes that you do not play in reality and that are not played and are not experienced. And it might be confusing if you see both the stuff that is and is not is all at the same place, but it is less confusing if you consider that the place can be up here and the place can be down here. That's my contribution. And as you make that oscillation or that movement between these two viewpoints or positions, it is a sorting or a refinement of the stuff that should exist and the stuff that should not exist, the things that are viable reality structures and the things that are not viable reality structures, and a separation of those two things. So as you move beyond binary and linear and non-multidimensional, and you're moving into higher dimensional, the first thing is you make a distinction. So as you're moving into unity consciousness, people are like, oh, unity consciousness means everything is the same and there's no distinction between good and evil and it all goes in the same soup pot together. And I'm like, no, the very first thing that happens when you go into a higher dimension is you have two soup pots. The one that is the stuff that is food that you're supposed to experience, and then the other stuff that is no thing, the soup pot of non-being where nothing exists in that soup pot. That is the very, very first thing to comprehend. And then from the soup pot of stuff that actually does exist, you can then begin with an intentional shaping or re-exploration of reality, depending upon which things that were formerly non-communicative or not together, you begin to put together. All right, so wait, hold on a second. I'm going to Um, um, sorry, I already got that. And Chigi's here. Hold on a second, but I want to talk about thank you, things that come together and the things that don't come together. Okay, so wait. Good opportunity for me to take a brief, lighthearted break and hug a dog. Come on over, hug a dog. I'll remember where I was, I swear. Come here, guys. Come on over. Chigi's got a toy. We will do some bribes. Nice done. It's very hot where I live right now, so Chigi does not really want to go outside. Okay, good job, good job. No, I'm being a little bit silly. Hold on a second, guys. You know what I'll do? Press pause, give Cheeky a little bit of food, and then come back. Hold on a sec. Brief 5-second break. Got a great question about particle and antiparticles relationship to FRL, and I will definitely get to that. So it would be like matter, antimatter, and they're always telling us crazy things about CERN, where they're like, "Oh yeah, a bunch of antiparticles got transported by refrigerated truck across CERN the other day." I know we have to laugh about these things. Okay, I promise I will get to that. But first, I want to read from my notes important stuff about when we do flying rainbow lasagna, creating a seamless continuum between two realms. And the key point is that these two realms were formerly divided apart. The realms could be considered the realm of sleeping and waking, or the realm of dreamlike inner potentials and fantasy states, and contrasted with the realm of five senses that other people can see, or easily put, the inside and the outside. So we talk about the inside as being like your non-formed realm because we consider it to be in the mind. We consider it like, where's the inside? It's in here, although sometimes it's kind of in here too. It's from the epidermis inward, but it represents your inner viewpoint or your inner world. And again, dogs, cats, other wonderful forms of life have an inner world. It is the height of irresponsibility when humans try to say that these other forms of life don't have an inner world, as like, they used to do vivisection and think that the animals couldn't feel pain or any of those things. Like it's all horribly, horribly untruthful. So yeah, no, when you start to awaken your higher vision, you can absolutely communicate with other forms of life and find out that they have an inner world as well. Some of you might feel like, how do you do that? It's a telepathic gift. And yes, it is not something that is measurable or like on the phone. It's with your inner ability. So for many people, there's not the validation of like, what are you doing? You think like, well, if it's not happening on a phone or some way that can be recorded or proven to someone else, it's therefore not happening. Have to go post-rational. Beyond rationality and beyond the definition or validation of what is quote unquote really happening and go into what you are experiencing, beyond what can be measured and proven to someone else. So the upshoot of all of this is in doing your multidimensional aspect of self and also becoming communicative with other forms of life, you must learn how to move beyond rationalism, because rational skepticism will also say, is there a photograph? Is there evidence? Is there shared video evidence? Can I prove this to someone else? And you must be prepared to go beyond proof and consider that to be a rational hoop or obstacle that you must jump over that is not adequate and also not meaningful. So moving away from rationalism in general and being able to consider what's going on, because some of what flying rainbow lasagna is an outer expression of your inner dream world or your inner desire or your inner creativity. And science and rationalism doesn't even often recognize or validate or comprehend or speak honestly about your inner world. Like science would say, like, your dream state is nothing. It is just the amalgamation of a bunch of random misfirings of neurons that happened because you ate a spicy pepperoni before you went to sleep at night. And it is nonsense. And you know that that's not what I think. I think that your inner dream world is absolutely a valid place that you go to and inhabit beyond the detritus and the flotsam and jetsam of your day. It is an actual experienced realm, but not every dream is an experienced realm. Some of it is nonsense and chorefulness. Some of it is important and happens in a shared space where you actually are connecting with other consciousnesses. So in life, sometimes you are talking to a plant, sometimes you are not. Like if you are like, I want to have a conversation with nature, I want to have a conversation with a ladybug or something like that. Like sometimes you are at the level of connectivity and communication where you can effectively talk to them telepathically. Sometimes you are not. And that is fair to estimate, but it's not truthful to paint everything with a paintbrush and say a plant has no inner world, or a planaria has no inner world, or a ladybug has no inner world. They absolutely have an inner world. And you have to effort and be a spiritual aspirant to be able to even perceive and validate their inner world, but it actually is there. So yes, you must look for it and to know that it is there. I have not used this analogy yet. Sorry, I'm also distracted because of your Tiki playing in the background, but she's having fun. So I'm only like distracted by good stuff. It was prairie dogs. I don't know if this is truthful, but it was the capacity to decipher prairie dog communication. They sound like these little rodents, like, you know, they're like squirrels. They live outside, but somehow their sounds in their community have been recorded, and then someone is busy translating prairie dog speak and testing out the vocabulary. And the challenge is like your ears are pretty much not calibrated to be able to hear the extremely fast and high-pitched noises that they make to communicate with one another. So they had to get very high quality microphones and do very high quality recordings of these higher frequencies, and then also slow them down to be able to sense what these different vocabulary words are, what these different phonemes are. Okay, so that's just one example, because at least prairie dogs are mammals. And you can hear, they have roughly the same type of hearing apparatus that you do in your ear, but just, you know, they're way up the scale, right? Let's talk about like a butterfly or a ladybug, something that works on smells and pheromones. You don't have an analog to what they are using to communicate with one another, or a bumblebee. These guys are working a lot with the world of smells and aromas, and you simply don't even have the architecture to comprehend and know. You can't just be like, well, like slow down these smells, and then we will understand what a butterfly is thinking. So almost impossible. When I talked about true telepathy as opposed to synthetic or nanotechnology inflamed telepathy, which is mind-to-mind connection on the technological realm. In the non-technological world, when you start to do telepathy, what you are doing is not sending English words to someone else. So if you want to talk to a prairie dog, you do not take the word hi, how you doing today, and just speed it up and send it at a high frequency to them so that it sounds like the Elvin Theodore and the Chipmunks or something like that. No, you have to learn how to translate it into their language. So in order for you to be able to effectively connect with other organisms on a bridge of love, first you have to get to the level of love, and then you have to be able to take the unfiltered intention to communicate and take the words away from it. And then you send that raw amount of information to your intended recipient, and then they take it and they translate it into butterfly or prairie dog or planaria so that they can comprehend it. So until you get to that level of love and love, or accelerate to that level, it is not really possible to communicate effectively. But once you do, you are able to communicate effectively. Okay, so first, like objective materialist science not being adequate to even talk about the inner realm. It can't weigh your inner realm on a scale, like how much imagination, how much does your imagination weigh, or how much do your emotions weigh? Like you can't deal with that. And also, your inner world is considered like a quantum world, or a world of pure energy, and as such, it responds to reality, or it responds beyond the limits and definition of what your five senses can do. So your five senses are about something that has, you know, heft and weight, and if you drop it, it will fall. and of other ways that you've learned how to navigate the world. Like these are truisms and they're reductionist, but they work. So you do them. But when you're working with something that is about your consciousness or your imagination or your emotions, you are working and experiencing beyond the realm of the five senses. So it's good that you have vocabulary with others where you can say, this is what's happening in the realm of five senses. But you just have to clarify that that is not the only level of existence, that all of you have another level or layer of existence. And then flying rainbow lasagna is when you are selectively reaching that inner well or that inner potential and externalizing it into the world. I do that as an artist. I get an idea or a vision in my mind that is how something should look or how something should sound as a song. And then I effort to make that thing the way that I heard it or felt it or sensed it inside of me. These are like ancient, valid, positive ways of doing things. So like that translation from the inner world to the outer world is something that's been going on for a long time. Flying Rainbow Lasagna is my contribution of how to do this even more and even more excellently. So it is about connecting things across time. So here in this moment now, you could imagine having an idea for a book and then writing a book. Initially, the idea is inside of you, then you write it, you externalize it, then it's boom, it's a book. It's something that is outside of you. But when you experience multidimensionality, you are like projecting aspects of yourself from this moment in time to either a lateral time or a forward potential or a time in the past. And then you are receiving information from that totality experience. So it's not the same as writing an externalized book that everybody can agree upon. When you do Flying Rainbow Lasagna, there might not be a person in the observership or audience or viewer participatory position who can appreciate what you're doing and see what you're doing and notice its artistry. It's pretty much going to be all you. So you're moving away from a validation of the five senses realm, where people have up until this point been looking for validation of their psychic experiences. Like, did I really dream about you or did I not? I will call you on the phone and say, hey, Mr. Friend, did you dream about me last night? And if he says yes, then I'm like, okay, that was a real thing. But if he says, no, you're crazy, then I'm like, I guess that was just me going through the flotsam and jetsam of my mind, right? But no, when you do Flying Rainbow Lasagna, there is not anyone, quote unquote, external outside of you who can look at you and be like, I see you doing the lasagna. I see you bringing together these aspects of reality. It's pretty much 100% your own experience that others can't see and know and validate. Okay, you have to look at. I'll get to your question about antimatter and matter. We'll do that at the end, probably, because I have to focus on the Mobius strip. Okay, so I didn't invent this. This is from a Swedish mathematician whose name was Mobius. But this is very similar in concept to this. The concept of a surface that was dualistic moving into unity. And when you do this, I don't want you to lose information. So losing information would look like going from a clear distinction between light and dark, or good and evil, or hot and cold, and then just being like, throw it all in one box together and it all equalizes out. Really important, because you're not supposed to say, I am evil as well. Like from everything that I'm talking to you, you can tell that I'm trying to prevent you from identifying with either madness or evil as a real part of yourself. It is important for you to put madness and evil into the category of non-self. And that is why I also rant and rage and even at times stand in the middle of a parking lot and rave against the concept of New Age shadow work, which I think is very flawed. And the problem is that it just puts all of these different emotional ranges into the same crock pot and stews it all together. When people are having an inner conflict and they're like, well, part of me feels like this and is moving at this rate, but then part of me feels like this and is moving at this rate. The flawed New Age shadow work says, Girl, it's all you. It's all in the soup pot together, and you're this too. And it's very facile because it's a way of getting past the inflammation that you experience in the world when you experience stuff that you're allergic to. Like, I'm allergic to that doo-doo. That's not me. It makes me feel bad, right? And the New Age flawed work, it says that you're allergic to it because it's you. You feel inflamed in response to it because it's you. You have something to learn from it. Hug it, hug it, hug a big piece of doo-doo, and you hug a piece of doo-doo and it gets on you, and you're like, oh, I guess I am full of doo-doo. It is me. And I'm like, no, none of that is right at all. That is so, so, so wrong. So I hope that that was hilarious and graphic. And please wipe it out with like a gelato so that you're not thinking about that. But let's now talk about in more truthful and correct reality, the distinctions in characteristics and personality. And I do have to talk about nanotechnology and 5G and other things like that, because these things have been, let me drink water, artificially creating bridges, cognitive bridges, telepathic bridges, and even genetic bridges between things that ordinarily would never connect together. And that is aberrant. So you should have strong boundaries and distinctions against certain organisms or thought patterns or substances because they are non-life affirming. Even in your own body, like, you have to keep your poop and your doo-doos away from your bloodstream. If you don't do that, it's a terrible disease that makes you die. So yeah, in your world, you're supposed to have the doo-doos, the poop, the bad stuff that is not you, strongly separated from the rest of you that is positive, life affirming, and that is growing and evolving. If you really can make a clear distinction in yourself between nothingness and somethingness, some parts of you are growing and evolving, and that gives you eternal life. And some parts of you are not growing and evolving. And if anything, they are slowing down or freezing or stopping their motion through time. And they are not life affirming. They do not add to life. And that's in your own body, in your own cellular structure, in your communities, and in your larger social dynamics, nation states and economies. All of it truthful, all of it truthful. Like your ecology, like in the ecological system, some organisms and some ways of doing things help to keep everything and everyone alive. And some things either slow down metabolic life force processes or stop them completely and lead to destruction and death. And the process of evolution, ascension, finery of your consciousness, and eventual victory, like of meta liberation, is dependent upon you separating out the stuff that slows you down. Like you have enough, I want to say, momentum and energy to propel you to where you need to go or get to that levels that you need to get to, but not if you have a bunch of friction that slows you down or a parasitic nature that drains energy from you and does not propel or give energy to you. And a lot of what you're doing with the symmetry of moving through time has to do with perfect reflections. Like this does not exist in a contextless void. There's another vortex that's over here. And when this goes over here, it meets its opposite. So you have like a laser that is always oscillating back and forth. And as it oscillates back and forth, it continues to feed itself. And this is how you have a perpetual motion machine. If you have some loss of energy, like 10 units, you can do that for forever. But if you have 10 units, then you have 9 units, and you're like, we cannot keep going like this. If you're going to keep on siphoning energy off of me, then we cannot keep going like this. And that is the confrontationalism that you face in your world right now. You have some aspects of self in your body, some aspects of community in humanity that is helping to create momentum and continue to generate life and to move forward. And there are some things that are reducing the amount of energy that is shifted back and forth or that is oscillated back and forth. And those things are friction or parasitic. and they are removing the viability of the entire system from it being able to go forward. And so when you find something that is like that, that threatens the viability of the entire system, you must confront it and you must respond to it. Otherwise, you don't have a system to be in anymore. Okay, so my confrontationalism is flying rainbow lasagna. And then I want you to know that you can also take this concept and you can use it in order to restore the corrective architecture. There's stuff that is supposed to be energized and is supposed to go in a life-affirming direction and continue to make experiences through time, separated from the stuff that does not propel you through time. So you do want to have certain levels of distinguishment. You don't want to just put everything together into the soup pot. You want to have distinguishment, and the characteristics that you want to do are to make sure that the things that are worthy of being in existence help you to stay in existence. I'm sorry, I got distracted because I'm looking down over here. Okay. Perpetual motion machine of the cosmos. The two positions of the torus have different qualities, energy and entropy, and the singularity jumps back down as it meets its symmetrical opposite. These forces diverge and converge. It is the perpetual motion machine of the cosmos, the diverging and converging. And when you're doing this on these larger abstract levels, there's an organizational principle, much like when unorganized light becomes a laser from this jumping back and forth. So your consciousness becomes more organized and you become more wise and more focused as you're having this experience. There are some aspects of consciousness that are moving away from focus and away from eternal life. And that's the detritus, the stuff that does not have long lastingness, and the stuff that will eventually go to non-being, which is entropy. And that stuff, like, you can help everyone by like making it go there faster. So let's also, I want to tell you about the Mobius strip, but like entropy, there is this thing that is known in science as the entropic heat death of the universe. Universe meaning the one descriptor of this particular timeline, even though you guys know that you're in a multiverse. But the idea goes that there was like an initial explosion of stuff called the Big Bang, and stuff will happen for a certain number of years, which is something like whatever, I think it's like 26 billion years. And then there won't be enough stuff to make stuff anymore, and stuff will stop happening. And to describe that more fully to you, it takes planetary nebula to make stars. You have to have raw ingredients to make cupcakes. Planetary nebula are the superheated dust and gas clouds from which stars coalesce. And there are a finite number of them. And some of them have already coalesced. Some of the cupcakes have already been baked into sun stars that you see shining in the sky up above you at night. But according to the universe and linear model of what is happening, there are a limited number of stars that can ever be made. And once you get past making all of the cupcakes that you can possibly make, then all that you have are the shining residue of the cupcakes that you have. And then when they are done, then you don't have any more cupcakes. And there is no more emission of light, no more emission of heat, no more creation, generation, and experience of that type of intelligent organizational principle. And you just have the slowing down or de-evolving of what has been experienced. And that is called entropy, according to the scientific definition of it, which is a slow process. When I talk about entropy, I talk about an instantaneous experience, not a slow pressing of the brakes, like jamming on the brakes to zero instantaneously. But in the concept of the entropic heat death of the universe, everything slows down. Like these cupcakes came out of the oven, they're cooling down, we're not making any more cupcakes. And then when those cupcakes are cooled down, you have no more new people, no more new stars, no more new thought, no more heat, no more energy, no more oomph. And what happens is you just have a lot of black holes, the end result of the final stage of what a star can be. And the black holes suck all the cupcakes out of existence and everything comes out. And then you're left with just nothingness, which is like a valid descriptor, but not the entire story. So just file that away because there will be more to be able to flesh that out. But the concept of entropy, when I talk about it, is an instantaneous and immediate and total state. So for an organism that should be in entropy, which is the non-being state, you do not want to have them be like Take as long as you want because they are really inconveniencing all of us. If there is a non-viable concept, thought, or organism or organization, the longer that it sticks around, the worse our life gets. Sending it to entropy helps us to be able to move forward without friction and without parasites taking our energy and slowing us down. So sending something to entropy, a la the flying rainbow lasagna, means you don't have to wait 13 billion years for that stuff to come to a complete halt. You don't have to wait 13 billion years for very, very flawed, evil, or erroneous characters to go out of existence. You're like, well, you know something? My life would be so much better if so-and-so would just shut the F up and get out of existence. I'm sure you can all consider someone in the world who is that way. We benefit if they go to non-existence immediately and sooner rather than later, because many of them would very happily continue to eke out a tiny portion of existence and continue to imbalance the entire cosmic infrastructure as a result. And what does that look like? Boom, 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 the pooties, those pesky occupiers of the interstices. They are that exact, I would say, narcissistic or self-centered, very negative personality characteristic. Those pooties are like this. I know I've screwed up my whole entire life existence and there's no hope for me, but maybe I can still have a tiny little semi-existence by vampiring off of all of you and making your life hard. And that's pretty much the situation that you're in right now and why you have to flying rainbow lasagna. When you flying rainbow lasagna with your DNA, you send all of that stuff to entropy now, not in 13 billion years. And imagine having access to like your lottery winnings now, as opposed to in 13 billion years. You're like, wow, there's so much I can do. And also it's so great that I have it now while this is relevant to me, because in 13 billion years, this will no longer be relevant. It's time to move on and have a different experience. Okay. I want to get to some of your wonderful questions and comments, but first let me do the Mobius strip. So again, this is a seemingly impossible shape. This is made by taking a strip of anything, like paper or fabric or wood, giving it one twist, and then joining the ends together. So this makes an impossible shape because it only has one surface or one edge. It is like a coin that only has one side, or a road that only has one side. Let's begin. I will put my finger on what we consider to be the outside surface, right? So here's the outside. It's facing the room that we're in. And I'm a little ant. I'm going to walk on the outside. Outside, 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 inside, more, inside, 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 inside. I have not lifted up my finger, please note. Inside, 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 and now if I could bend my finger even more, I would outside. Now my finger is back on the outside. Outside, 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 outside. Move from the inside to the outside and back to the inside again without lifting up my finger. I'm a little ant. I made this transition from the past to the future and back to the past again, to the present again. All right, let's do it with the edge. Let's say this is like the edge that's closest to the camera, right? Edge closest to you. All right, close, close, close to you, 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 far away from you. Whoop, far away from you. Now I'm the one that's close to me. I had to kind of twist myself around. Here I am on the edge that's close to me. And wait a minute, as I twist myself around here and I come over here, then I'm back on the edge that is close to you. That's this one over here. Boom. One edge. All right. So this is very, very similar to flying rainbow lasagna, where again, what you have here is a whole bubble that has an outer side and an inner side, and we have poked it with God's fingers. So here I am touching the outside of the bubble, but here I am touching the inside of the bubble. This is where a little ant is alive, walking through time, and this is where a little ant would be on the membrane of death, or in an inaccessible place that's inaccessible to us. And these two places cannot talk to one another. But when you flying rainbow lasagna or add an additional motion and an additional degree of freedom to this shape, what you end up having is a little ant that can talk to the other little ant. Now my finger is a little ant. I'm on the outside surface, the surface of this sculpture that faces the room that we are within. Then when I get here, I get to the inside surface. My little ant has not lifted up, and I'm in the layer of red. Red is the layer of physicality. I'm in your physical DNA, and I'm on the outside of this time vortex. Then I move to the inside of the time vortex. Then I move to the outside of the time vortex. Then I move to the inside of the time vortex. These two surfaces become communicative. And the only place on this sculpture where the surfaces communicate is the red layer. That's the layer of physicality, your cellular body, and the five senses realm. That is where the past and the future, or the inside and the outside, communicate. This happens most visibly in your DNA. I'm grabbing my thing so I can say this properly, because it's what I want to say. Okay, DNA, at the light body level. Okay, resolving duality with the flying rainbow lasagna. The little ant on the inside and the outside of the expanding bubble of time. Exactly how does flying rainbow lasagna affect duality? Affecting us on our light body level. DNA's connection to light and your connection to time has a direct effect on your energy field, Taurus into flying rainbow lasagna. So I've talked to you already about how identical twins do not develop identical diseases. It's because your DNA has behavior. It's not a dead, static thing. It's very much a sentient and dynamic aspect of your being, and responds to your consciousness and your cognitive expectations of reality. That is truthful in the sense of just your methylation, which is how open your DNA scrolls are to be read, or how much they are closed up and hidden away. I use the example, of course, if you believe determinism, like a disease is fated, you're going to get it. If it's in your DNA, then it means that you might have the solutions or effective response to that disease methylated or curled up and not accessible inside of you because of a belief in the limitation of what your body can do. You become the truthful expression of your beliefs. So that's one direct example of how your emotions, mind, and expectations of worldview have an impact on your DNA. But now we get into the abstract sense of your DNA being supercoiled. When your DNA is supercoiled, it's like a spring, and that spring creates donut structures. And you can flying rainbow lasagna with those donut structures, meaning vibrate them like this, or vibrate them like this. The donuts are stacked up like this. But when you do that, you blend together realities. Just like you have one reality where you married a particular girl and another reality where you married a different girl. When you start to do flying rainbow lasagna, you blend together from these two realities. A scoop from here and a scoop from here, and you put them on the same plate together. And that is the ultimate expression of the truth of who you are. This is really deep stuff because it's beyond the definition of self as who you are on only one timeline. You become the definition of self, or your greatest aspect of self, based upon the amalgamation of the highlights of who you are from a variety of timelines. That each of those decisions adds up to some very truthful aspect of who you are. And that's like in the decisions that you're making, but then you can also consider this in terms of your DNA structure. So now I'm getting into this like super abstract stuff, and it might even be difficult for you to conceive of it in this world where like there's so much bad satellite stuff and so many things that are really inhibiting your real, true expression. Like, let's just say it's garbage ocean right now, and it's hard for you to swim around like a beautiful mermaid with all this garbage. But at a certain point, the frequency garbage will be gone, and then you will be able to do the flying river lasagna much more easily and effectively. And before 5G frequency garbage, this is what my life was like. A sense of being able to easily oscillate between this reality and other realities. Like there's a reality where your life is either optimized or where you have problem solved, where you're like, I don't have the solution to blah, blah, blah problem, but that version of me has it. So I will oscillate a part of me into that time reality, take a scoop of that solution and bring it back with me. Maybe that solution is like a song or a genetic pattern of how you're dancing, or an idea or an invention or a way of being. And when you're able to come back to this layer of reality, you bring that decision or capability with you. So you can't bring physical stuff. Like, I'm going to hop onto a neighboring timeline where I have a giant pile of gold doubloons and I will bring a coin back with me and then I'll be rich on this layer of time. I mean, hydrate. The answer is no, of course not. You cannot do that. But we all enjoy envisioning a version of ourselves where we are like swimming in gold doubloons, like throw it up in the air, like showers of fantastic wealth happening upon you. But the real wealth is in ideas or inspirations. Think about if you were going to travel through time and you couldn't bring a gold coin, but maybe you could bring a really good song. Like, what if you memorized all of the really good songs that the Beatles wrote, went to a different timeline or a different magical fantasy land, and you presented yourself as a musical genius? And you're like, oh yeah, I know this song, Hey Jude, and then I know this song, Here Comes the Sun, and then I know this song, whatever, Revolution Number 9. And then they would be like, amazing, like you're so smart. You'd be like, yeah, like I plagiarized this from a neighboring timeline. It's all new to you, but amazing to me. So of course, it's a hilarious plagiarism paradigm, but think of it in a truer sense, where you're not necessarily stealing from someone else and then trying to pass off that work as your own, but you're able to bring with you aspects of inspiration or cognitive structures. So that could be a formula, like a math formula, or a song, or a recipe, or a way of doing something, and then you apply that to your world. So I do this all the time, like a version of myself that is in a parallel reality that might have figured out how to respond to a difficult situation. I already did the problem solving on that layer of reality, so I'm going to get that solution and then apply it to where I am right now. So this is how sophisticated you can become with the use of flying rainbow lasagna. And it does relate to the current levels of like struggles for inner freedom against technology and against artificial intelligence. Okay, take a pause. We're going to liquefy your brains a little bit more. But first, let me go to wonderful questions and comments over here. Okay, because this was a good one. Question from Joni. What about particle and antiparticle relationship to FRL? So a long time ago, I did go to it was even when I still lived in upstate New York, so it must have been like over 13 years ago. I went to a speech, like a teaching explanation by a guy who's a PhD professor. His name is Dr. Gates. I don't know if he's still around, but he taught all about superpositioning, which is very limited. Like, this is not a validation of his work. Please know that when I went there, I was like, like maybe this guy might want to know about lasagna. So I gave him my lasagna information at the end of it. But I was even in the audience feeling that it is flawed. So position and superposition, or matter and antimatter, are inadequate attempts to be able to explain and describe some symmetry in the construction of the cosmic infrastructure. There is not something that is called matter and then antimatter. Maybe we consider this even from the Marvel superhero comic books, where there's Superman, but then there's Bizarro Superman. Like, there's a mirror world where Superman is actually evil and his face is ugly and he goes around doing bad stuff. Like, this is simplistic and reductionist, but that is kind of how scientists who are supposed to be sophisticated look at matter and antimatter. Matter as if it is Superman, the good guy who's strong and fights bad stuff. And then there is antimatter, who would be like the opposite in behavioral characteristics of Superman, someone who's weak and who hurts stuff or does bad stuff instead of helping us. And this is how science, in its very, very flawed, infantile view of the world, has been defining matter. Like, matter is not that way, because science also defines this as a type of battle, ongoing, eternal battle between matter and antimatter. And if the two were to meet, when worlds collide, and then this and then like that. That's different science fiction stories. So these are all like colorful, but I hope that you take them as fantasies, not as truthful realities, because you do not actually have that in reality. Like a type of particle that is stuffy stuff versus a type of particle that is not stuffy stuff. And these two things meet, then what they will do is like neutralize each other out of the world. That is not what is going on. So there's not that level of symmetry. It's a bit of a facile description of reality. And also, I do not agree to the paradigm that science and objective materialist proposes of dark energy. That there is this vaunted or expected level of energy and dark energy because there is a shortcoming. Like these are all non-adequate ways of perceiving and describing reality. So science is like, well, we're able to calculate and add up that there's this much energy, but there should be more. So we will presume that there's more and we'll call it dark energy. So none of these things really work. Okay, what science is calling matter and antimatter are both part of stuff that exists, not stuff that doesn't exist. You can't put the stuff that doesn't exist in a box. And if the stuff that doesn't exist interacts with or meets the stuff that exists, like it's not like it would be like a neutralization, because what happens at the 0 point at infinity is the overlapping of stuff that exists and stuff that does not exist. What we do when we do flying rainbow lasagna is put those two things, the stuff that exists and the stuff that doesn't exist, into two different or more than two separate reality structures or separate places where they're each acting differently. And this gives greater degrees of freedom to you because you are no longer having to deal with the presence or after effects of stuff that doesn't exist. You're like, if it doesn't have a presence, how do I have to deal with it? I'm like, let me tell you, girl, right now you're having to deal with the presence of stuff that doesn't have presence. I know, but soon you will be on the bullet train of infinity, where you are moving super fast and you are only surrounded by everything else that is also moving equally super fast. And you are surrounded beyond that by no thing that unexists, doesn't move at all. It's different and hard and probably hard for you to conceptualize. But as you are moving infinitely fast, there is no contextual relevance point around you of stuff that is not moving that fast. The only stuff that exists is you, and all of the other stuff non-exists, which is different than saying that something is antimatter that exists. You feel the distinction. Stuff that doesn't exist versus stuff that is antimatter that exists. Good. You're doing very, very well. Fantastic. That was very, very good muscle building on your part. Okay. And then also goes on to ask and consider. Diverge and converge aligns to cosmic breathe the closer to arriving to cosmic unity. And then she goes on to say, from my perspective, entropy has processing time. Going to non-existence immediately is oblivion. Okay, so in whatever word you would like to describe it as, I am proposing an immediate cessation of movement through time. So when I was talking about how you look at time and persistence of vision, take a snapshot of something that is not moving and a snapshot of something, further down the road, and you connect them together. The thing that causes the connection together is the rotation of your chakras, wheels, zoetropes spinning, and also the gyration and movement of your DNA. These are the things that are going on in your body form and in your light body that tie together the static moments of reality into an actual experienced, like moving film strip of reality. When you send something to entropy, it means that you do not create another frame in its movie for it to continue to inhabit. Ordinarily, you have, let's say, box cars of reality. Here's a subway car, train car here, 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 here. And what you're doing with your mind and your consciousness is jumping from this one to this one to this one to this one. And every single one of those frozen moments, you are the thing that is in motion, and you are the thing that is lending a vivification to time. But entropy is when whatever is that consciousness doesn't jump anymore. It's 3:40 p.m. And that consciousness, if it goes to entropy, does not jump into the train car of 341. It does not jump into the train car of 342 or 343. It stays stuck in 340. And that is really what is happening on the membrane of death. Those are the dead ends or the consciousness cul-de-sacs of consciousnesses that are propelling through time. You can think of them as billiard balls, but that's just like a ball moving forward like this one. It's really like it's a crunchy thing that goes and it goes forward, but then at a certain point it hits the end, it hits a cul-de-sac, and it does not propel forward anymore. When a human being or an organism, animal presence dies, its DNA still has motion after a couple of days. So like the heartbeat stops, the brain metabolic functions stop, but the DNA is still going, but it slows down. At first, the DNA is going like this. Then after a day, the DNA is like, whoa. And then after 2 days, it's like, whoa, it's hardly moving. And after 3 days, it's like, whoa, like it hardly moves at all. And then it stops moving. That is really the entropic process of that organism. It hits the membrane of death, and then it has the slowing down aspect to it. The entropy is a solution that is definitely preferable to death, not only in that it doesn't take 3 days for a consciousness to slow down and to come to a resolution, but also in the sense that it is even beyond death. Like it is a death of entropy is a death of the physical, and also it is an end to the consciousness journey of something that is energy or matter wildly out of place. So now I hope that we can talk about this from a non-human perspective, because from the human perspective, you might be like, I'm attached to a person or to an organism or to a face. I like them and I want them to keep moving through time. But when you are in these higher levels of excellence, you're like, the math is bad. That is not math that is supposed to exist in reality. And so that organism cannot continue to move forward. It must go into entropy, which is a frozen, non-moving state. In fact, entropy is even more cold and frozen than your most frozen substance in the world. It is so frozen that it's called a Bose-Einstein condensate. On the levels of density and states of matter chart, it is denser than physical stuff. So here's like matter. If you get even denser than matter, go over to this. Here's energy, less dense, faster, more lively. Here's stuff that's more dead. What is more dead than matter? What is more frozen than matter? The Bose-Einstein condensate. What is that? That is what happens when you take all of these individuated atoms that were bouncing off of each other and having interactions and feeling heat and self-expression, and you slow them down until they are almost totally frozen. Totally frozen would be 0 degrees Kelvin. And when you slow something down to just a tiny fraction faster than 0 degrees Kelvin, it's moving really slow. Like I'll kind of balance here because it goes so slow. This is a molecule. This is an atom. Okay, two atoms like this, super slow. Can't even see them. They're moving so slow. Whoa, so slow, so slow. That's how slow they move. But they don't stay separate. What happens is they superpose. They overlap upon one another. And as they overlap upon one another, they create something that is kind of like one atom. And you can imagine it's like, here's an atom, here's another super slow atom on top of there, and everyone else who is standing in the same footprint as this incredibly slow moving atom. And when that happens in this level of supreme density and overlappingness, what happens is all of these atoms start to behave as if they are the same atom. That is the essence of unity consciousness that is achieved at the lowest level of energy. The lowest level of energy is 0 degrees Kelvin, or a state of total non-movingness known as entropy. Instead of considering the end of a consciousness journey that is flawed consciousness as being punishment and a world of infinite friction, which is what I would define as Christian hell. Let me just hydrate some more. Like we consider say, life is an audition. If you're doing the right things and saying and thinking the right things, you will stay moving and keep moving through time. And if you don't do or say or experience the right things, then what will happen is you will slow down and start to experience infinite friction, and still have consciousness and still have being. That's what I would define as a Christian hell. And that's also what I would define as what is happening at the level of the membrane of death to these fragmented personality detritus of stuff that did bad time experiments. But to contrast, going into a Bose-Einstein condensate or achieving true total entropy is a liberation. It is a liberation from the experience of time, and it is a non-friction state. So it is not a punishment for doing your math wrong. And this is big in moving beyond the sense of duality, good versus evil, I versus I, light versus dark. There is some moral judgment that is applied. You're doing your math wrong, or you're singing or doing something wrong, and therefore you deserve smackdown. Like, you're going to get punished. You're going to get sent to hell, hell, hell. And then you're going to burn, burn, burn in a ring of fire, like the Johnny Cash song. But instead, what you can consider with Flying Rainbow Lasagna is that there's a better resolution. Instead of the resolution of a consciousness stuck like a bug splatted on the windshield of time with all of this friction blowing at it for forever and never resolving it, it is an atom or a particle of consciousness in the correct position, which is non-being, where it is not moving through time anymore, and it experiences no friction, and it also experiences no self-sentience. So Bose-Einstein condensate is not only a cessation of movement through time, in not only a unity consciousness of all the other atoms that are also not moving through time, it is non-sentience or non-self-awareness or non-being. All of the stuff that shouldn't be gets to not be. And instead of taking 13 billion years to figure out that it shouldn't be and making a lot of problems, trouble for the rest of us while it figures that out, it can go there right away. And that is the essence of what Flying Rainbow Lasagna is. So when I invented Flying Rainbow Lasagna and innovated it in 2001, that meant that you guys all don't have to wait 13 billion years for the errors and the bad math and the bad music to finally go down so that you can think clearly. You can actually turn down the volume on all that stuff instantaneously. And that is what you would want to do. So if you would like to call that, definitely. Thank you. Joni says, thank you. And I'm so happy and so grateful to give it to you, because it is a solution and also a merciful solution. And I feel a little bit proselytizing, like I'm going to go around door to door, knock, 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 like knock, 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 like, have you heard of our Lord and Savior Entropy? And what is it? I don't want it ever to sound like that. But I joke about those things. But for real, for those aspects of consciousness that are malformed or bad math, or again, think of it like a vector of a billiard ball, because that is coming from someplace in time. Here's a billiard ball, imaginary billiard ball, and it's like rolling along, it's going somewhere. That, like, once it starts out on its journey, like, it's going to hit into you. It's going to hit into everything. It's a screwed up thing that's going in a screwed up direction and causes screwed up reverberations as it plings against everyone else. When you send it to entropy, you stop that billiard ball of consciousness from going around and messing stuff up by all the different things that it will knock against, or edifices that it will create or that it will interact with. You perform a community service when you send something directly to entropy. So let's talk about some of the different things that can be sent to entropy. You should begin with like your own body form and your own characteristics, because that's where there's like no question about the viability or what you should be in control of. Like in your own house, you should clean your own house. You should put up your own curtains. You should decorate your own house. Your body is your own house. In your own DNA, you have some stuff that you want to energize, that you want to keep going through time and keep alive and keep vivified or viable. And then you have some characteristics that are inside of you that you want to send to entropy. That's bad music that you're like, this is terrible music. Turn down the volume on that music or those characteristics. And those bad things, don't ever use that thumbnail. Please, I'm talking to the AI. Don't use that as my thumbnail. But the silly things that you don't want to hear, that might be a disease like cancer or something like that. You're like, turn down the volume on that, send it to entropy. I never want to hear that. Or some other form of disease or death or pathology. So the things that are within you that are not life affirming, you get to send that to entropy and no longer propel that through time. That in itself is a lifetime of, it's a hobby that will last a lifetime. The gift that keeps on giving, cleaning up your own genetic code. But seriously, folks, it is a big task, not something to be accomplished in one day. Like it is part of the fast forward on the complete exploration of every single possible wrong note that can exist within this time structure. As you start to become an expert in flying rainbow lasagna, you are able to turn down the tendencies or turn down the volume on the self characteristics that would have killed you. Bad decisions, bad tendencies, bad behaviors, bad math that would have killed you. You don't have to take them to their logical conclusion. Like, whatever, use smoking tobacco as one example. You're like, well, smoking tobacco, like, if I keep going, if I keep doing this, I'm going to die. You don't have to die. You can be like, I think it's time for me to quit. And then you quit, and then you avoid the timelines where you die horribly from taking too much tobacco all the time. Think, and I know that that's simplistic, but think about that on an expanded level. Moving away from the behavioral habits, not only health habits like smoking tobacco, but how you think of the world. Like I have brought to you the proposal that even the concept or expectation of death and mortality is like a bad habit, like the way that smoking tobacco is a bad habit. You can drop the habit. Drop the habit of considering that death is the inevitable end of your life. And you can start a new mental habit that is the expectation of continued journeying through time. As you do that, it changes your DNA. That's part of the essence of flying rainbow lasagna. The first thing that I'm teaching everyone is you don't have to die. So that's the first thing. You go from, it's like the robot, the bad, clunky, not very graceful dance that your people taught you when you were a kid. They're like, yes, that goldfish died and one day you'll die too. And in that moment, you're like, ka-chunka. And then all of your DNA changes and you go towards the membrane of death. But if you are able to be restored, then you can think, oh, I don't have to die. I can think different patterns, make my DNA behave in different patterns, and that brings me to different areas of the time field. The corollary to that is that there is matter and energy out of place. It is visible in some organisms, like some people, or whatever, like, a weird animal or something like that, something that's in reality, but it's way off its path. It's not the type of person or being that it's supposed to be. It's very distorted, or it's not where it is supposed to be. Both of these two things are the example of pathogenesis or disease in the world. So one example would be like, it's fine for a particular bacteria to be living out in soil in the middle of a field, but you don't want it in your sinuses, up your nose, you will die. And same thing with certain people or certain characteristics. It is fine for them to be over here, experiencing this layer of reality. That's like being in a field. But you don't want them to be over here in front of your face. They're not supposed to be there. And when we think about this and apply this to certain people that you can see in your world, let's talk about whatever, like evil government leaders. Like they are like some kind of gross fungal microbe that belongs in the middle of a field where no one will ever experience it, not on TV or at the top of a leadership hierarchy where you're going to experience them all the time and be allergically sneezing in their presence. That's just one example. I hope it's hilarious. I think everyone probably thinks about President Trump when I say those things. They're like, yeah, that guy, I'm allergic to him. Get him out of here. But there are many that are non-contributive, either personality characteristics, people, or organisms or organizations in your world. And those things all need to go to entropy in the sense that they are trying to really choose my words effectively here. Matter and energy out of place. So some people right now in our world are still in existence and they are still on this timeline in this shared reality, even though theoretically they should have left the planet all the way back here. Maybe this was 5 or 6 years ago. And maybe some of those people did something artificial to extend their life. Like, I think Dick Cheney has already passed on, but that guy, like, he had a lot of hearts. Didn't he? Like heart transplant, like potato chips, like just getting a new heart all the time, talking about stuff like that. People who are obviously bad, evil, wrong, or bad math, and they should have died because when you develop a bad disease, it's like you did something wrong. And now you should not be like, I think I'll take the heart of a healthy person to enable me from all the bad stuff that I did. You should be like, wah, wah, that's the end. Dun, 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 dun. You're dead. But some people don't do that. They're like, oh, I spent a whole life being evil, like Dick Cheney, and doing bad things. And then I think I would like to have the heart of a healthy person now to help me stay alive a few more years. You have that right now, but you have that with more than just one selfish person that is extending their life at the expense of others. There are, of course, many, many very troubling and stressful and distressing examples of medical tourism and organs for sale and things like that. Like that, even a non-Dick Cheney, non-famous person can whatever go to certain countries and just be like, I think I would like to have a new kidney. Like, oh, I'll take that one, please, and they kidnap the guy and give you a new kidney. Like, no, all of that is very, very wrong in terms of extending your life at the expense of another. But there are even more subtle forms of this beyond physical grabbing of an organ from another person. Some of it is economic, taking the energy from a person's bank account and putting it into your bank account. And some of it is even at the level of biophotons with the nano neural network and very unhealthy satellite systems and the networking of bodies together that, of course, I fight against this in every way that I can, that has been the ultimate unfairness or injustice in some people who should be dead and off of this timeline artificially buoyant, keeping their own consciousness alive on this timeline by sucking energy off of other people. And this goes beyond traditional dark magic of like attention, where, like a celebrity or a person of notoriety gets attention from someone else and they seem to thrive on the attention and stay alive, or wealth. Like, I'm rich, I'm famous, I will stay alive longer than I'm supposed to stay alive. But then even beyond that, whatever form of techno nano vampirism has been deployed in this world, it has artificially drained and slowed down some of you who are good people who should be in the world, and artificially elevated and propelled bad people who should no longer be in the world. And there are actually a lot of bad people that, if they hadn't been given an artificial form of life augmentation, would already be gone. And you would already be like, oh, I'm so glad that they're in entropy because they were making my life so unpleasant. They already should be gone. So now you comprehend that. Like, of course, I wrote my notes from 10 years ago and wrote about all of this before these techno vampire systems were deployed in the world. So now you must respond to those things. What I'm trying to bring forward is the justification for why you should send something to entropy. It is not merely an abstraction. If it were an abstraction where it was like, hey, you do you, I do me, you're not taking anything from me, go crazy, girl, I'd be fine with that. but in both dark magic, which is the siphoning of energy from like if you're at this level, but they tilt your chakras so that all of a sudden you're not at your best orientation in time. That is one way where you can't just accommodate, like you do you, I do me, because they are actively inhibiting you. And then the other thing is through technological and neurological accessing of your energy. Like I told you, die, your DNA slows down its gyrations over the course of several days. So, like, what if someone beams energy at you? That makes your DNA slow down a little bit. And then they take that energy, and then you're like, oh, I'm not feeling that great. I better get my DNA back up to speed, then I'll feel better. This is actively going on. Some of it is satellite stuff. And of course, I just have to say fictionally, in case there's any problems with me saying this in a video, but also fictionally, when you go to the airport and you have to walk through one of these things that's going to like scan you or something like that, that is the essence of what it is doing. It is slowing down your DNA. I'll call those things like DNA scatterers, fictionally, of course. And then it can take time for you to get your DNA back into its healthy and vital forms and dances that it's doing. And it's not by accident at all that these assaults on DNA are placed in gateways and portals that you must go through if you want to participate on a larger level in society. And this is why I don't go through those portals, and I encourage people to avoid going through those portals because they change the momentum at which your DNA is moving, and then you have to try to get your momentum back. And I talked with actually a couple of different people who had flown recently. They had to go internationally, and one of them felt like very fragmented until she was able to go to a stream in nature and put her feet in the stream and kind of like get herself structured again. So please know, like, it's not permanent, but it slows you down. And I think that if you slow yourself down too much, or if you lose too much of that momentum, it can be difficult to re-achieve it. And it can take people off of an optimum timeline where your DNA is doing this and put you onto a non-optimum timeline where your DNA is, oh, like this. And then you have whatever the expression of certain diseases and things like that. Okay, so apart from the literalism of DNA behavior and how that expresses in protein forms, your DNA is a bridge of light. It is a form of sentience or intelligence. When something goes into a Bose-Einstein condensate, all sentience is removed. So please know that the movement of your DNA and its ability to propel you through life, like this is a gift and something that you have to protect. Like you are I don't have the word for it. Like you protect it. You are a bearer of DNA. Like you bear DNA and you have to protect it and make sure that other stuff doesn't siphon energy off of you or dilute what you are supposed to do. And then of course it is your goal or responsibility to keep it in its healthy and vital patterns to bring it forward through time. Like everything about DNA is about the transmission of energy through time or the transmission of intelligence across time. And just like with time, there's not a way to like make it stop without destroying aspects of its basic nature. So the movingness of DNA and of sending these things down the time road are part of a foundational description of what it is, just like light flows and you can't really stop it from flowing, and time flows or moves, has movement. You can't really stop it from moving without radically redefining what it is. Let me read this over here. So Becca, and thank you for being in the class, says, when I flew in December, I requested you to not go through the scanner, and the TSA agents gave me a really hard time about it. They were very rude. And she goes on to say, had to wait almost 20 extra minutes for the pat down. It was unsettling, but I stood my ground. Flying back home, I didn't encounter any mean agents. You know, I'm very, very glad that you asked for the pat down. I'm going to encourage anyone, like if you have to go through the airports, do it, even though I'm sure that they give you the stink eye and, everybody doesn't like it. Please do that. And to maintain the sovereignty of your own energy field, and to normalize that. And I'm also encouraging people, because they do another type of scan, but not everywhere. but they scan people's eyes. And they're saying that it is to scan for like your identity. They need to scan your retinas. They have to do something like that. But the problem is that it is light. Quality of the light that they are subjecting your DNA to in a scan is not good. And whatever they flash into people's eyes, your retinas are connected to your light body. Like your DNA is a big aspect of your light body, and it's more than just a bright light that is being shined in your retinas for personal identification processes. It is also intending to have an impact on you, like put a recipe or a flavor into you. Please know that that is something that you also really, really want to protect yourself from. So your light body must be protected from non-life affirming forms of light. And also your light body must, and they can be artificial, like a camera flash or something like that, but they can also be other people. Like when we talk about sending people to entropy, some people are emitting a form of false light that is friction to you or reducing your own vital life force energy and making it more difficult for you to move through time effectively towards your goal, which is infinity and, the central core timeline. So at one point, it might have been possible to be like, I do me, you do you. But even then, there was a lot of connectivity and I would say cross-pollination, but like reciprocal influence. And now when they turned on the nano network and 5G, fictionally, of course, all of this created artificial hyperconnectivity and influence in a way that it shouldn't have. You should have natural hyperconnectivity, which happens at the level of love and above. And that's because everybody is literate and you have gained your capacity to be in the university of the universe, and you should be hyperconnected and talking to people, and everybody's in the band and everybody can play their instrument. But when you're in this world where people are not yet at the level of just love, and then you use technology to create a hyperconnectivity in their DNA or in their energy field, like a giant slush fund, or in their consciousness, a giant slush fund of collective consciousness, that is all very diminishing because, again, you have some people or organisms or characteristics that should be slowing down and going out of reality. And you have some characteristics that should be preserved or going faster in order to stay in reality. And so the great insult that I'm perceiving in the world right now is people who have a potential to stay alive and keep going are being slowed down by those who have no potential. Like they have no hope in finishing the marathon. They are, I would say life's losers, but this doesn't sound very good, but it's true. And you can point to them, President Trump, they don't have a hope, but some of us have hope. And that means that you are organism that has potential to be refined. You don't have to be a perfect person, but you have to have enough potential to be able to be a viable container going forward. And if you clear out the stuff that is wrong or erroneous, you can continue to move forward. So this is everything when I talk about forming your raft of consciousness or your bark, like your sun bark to go on the Nile and cross the Duat. Although you're not going to die, you're going to face this assessment while you are vivified and cellularly alive. You should form your worldview and structure your belief system very, very conscientiously so that way it will be like a raft that will bring you forward and keep you buoyant, as opposed to belief systems that will cause you to go into a sunken or diminished state or bring you to entropy. So one example of a foundational plank in your platform to keep you going through life is the belief in the truth, like the true nature of God and divinity. God exists, divinity exists. That is like a foundational concept that I can affirm to you. I know that divinity exists. I know that God exists. And I know that that is a load-bearing concept in being able to bring your consciousness forward. So I'm not here to criticize you if you are atheistic or you don't believe in God. are entitled to your own viewpoint. But I will tell you that that is like, if you get set off into the ocean, that's going to spring a leak and you're not going to go very far, because the truth is that God does exist. So these things are also like not something that I'm just argumentative about or philosophical about. Like, let's get into the consciousness ring and let's box and fight against each other. Like, that's human philosophy. And I'm not at that level. I'm really just at the level of perceiving truth that is abstract truth and then reporting it to you so that then you can know like how to build a boat and how to go forward. So another one is the concept that death is necessary. I'm like, no, that's a flawed and erroneous concept. So God exists, death exists, but it's not necessary or something that you have to experience. And then other things that I share with you in this class about the nature of reality being a refinery for consciousness and moving forward. The most challenging thing is that you're in the world right now that is a end result of mixing of ingredients or amalgamating things that should never have been stuck together. You are already I need to hydrate, sorry, in a level of reality like a soup pot, crock pot, where flavors have been mushed together that don't belong together. And you already have some very horrible conflicting flavors that it is necessary for you to separate out. So you begin with the assessment in your own being of what are the flavors that are not life affirming, and you separate those out. And then from there, you're able to become powerful in your community to similarly separate out non-life affirming flavors from your community. And it is increasing level of personal responsibility and personal momentum. So I tell you to begin with your own body and your own familial characteristics. And then as you begin to become more empowered and move at a faster metabolic rate, then you can move into like your whole neighborhood and your whole country and then your whole planet. But I would say don't just jump to the whole entire planet, because that is a very, very big thing to try to clear out. Like if you put an entire Thanksgiving turkey down your garbage disposal, like the garbage disposal will stop. It will not work. It will not chop that up. You have a giant clog in your human dynamics, your society, your nation states, your economy, your religion. That's big stuff. That's the giant clog that you shouldn't try to food process yet. You should start with the food processing of your own estimations, your own stuff about thinking about economy and thinking about life and thinking about good versus evil and thinking about what is correct moving forward. Just begin with those things in your own self. And please know also that when I talk about your externalization of your internal state, I think this is the most direct way to be able to clean things up on a larger level. So instead of saying like, I want to clean up the world, I'm going to go around and I'm going to forcibly, like talk to people's minds and shake them by the shoulders and be like, listen to me, like stupid, listen to me. You can't do that. But what you can do is change on an internal level your own experience. And then that externalizes this internal truth and has a giant impact on the rest of reality. So going around to people and either like putting them in handcuffs, shaking them by the shoulders, smacking them across the face, or talking to them and saying like, be like this, has a minimum impact that will give you 10% of change. But if you embody a different pattern and then radiate that as the externalization of your internal state, this is how you truly have an impact on the world, more than merely 10%. So I'm giving you the fastest, easiest, coolest way to be able to get through this. Suzuki says, it's gotten hard to be around other humans. I am mostly by myself and it makes me feel like I'm antisocial, but I will just be by myself for forever. I would like for you to know, like, it may not be for forever, but I think that that is actually a very socially positive and self-cultivating or life-affirming thing that you're doing right now. And I'm very similar. So I'm just trying to collect my thoughts for a moment to be able to say this. So socializing is good. No man is an island. We all need to have other good people around us. And your end of your journey, what does your journey look like? It looks like living in community. For all of us, eventually we will create and build the type of civilization that we wish to be a part of, that is not an unwanted amalgamation of good and evil, which is what you presently have. And also, please know, you will be restored into connectivity and civilization. You will be connected to all of nature, all that is good, and many other good human beings in the aftermath of this bad conflict that you're in right now. But in the world that we're coming out of, it's an amalgamation of good and evil, or positive and negative personality characteristics. It used to be that it was like negative stuff stayed in its own lane. Like Hollywood, like all those evil people, they'd be like, they all went to LA and they became a part of Hollywood and they didn't bother me in my own life. But now through the nano neural satellite connectivity, fictionally, a lot of those non-viable presences are forcibly interjecting themselves into your mind or into your experience. I'm like, hey, if you want to make bad music, like go make bad music, whatever, in Hollywood, and I just won't listen. But if they start to beam that song into your brain and you can't ignore it and you have to respond to it, then you're in a different layer of reality. So when they turned on 5G, it became a non-ignorable, what's the word? Non-recreational choice, where you all of a sudden had to become very selective and self-protective to keep out the evil, or I use that word as a catch-all, so please excuse me, but like the unwanted signals that are not life-affirming from absorbing into you. And it has now become a 100% daily effort, at least for me and other people, to constantly try to keep out the non-life affirming signals, so that way I can hear myself, feel my true nature, and feel my own true divine connection. So Suzuka, if you mostly keep to yourself in this moment, I would really affirm that and celebrate that, because a lot of other people are full of injections, full of nano wetware, fictionally connecting to AI and government nation state mind control agendas and substances that are bringing them closer to death and bringing them away from eternal life. And again, you should be able to be like, you crazy girl, like you do you. I'm over here doing natural ascension. But they have been really dragging us down by creating a type of energetic friction that we must respond to. So the best thing you can do is limit your interactivity, disengage from them, don't let them drain you or make you move at a slower rate. And then also, I'm on the job. I am sending lots of stuff to Entropy. So I'm here teaching you about entropy and how you can do that, and encouraging you and empowering you to start to do that in your own dance. And then I am doing it like super, I would say like your life depends on it, super intense efforts at all times to send the stuff to Entropy and the people and the thought forms to Entropy that need to do that, so that we can live our life. Like one good example is the expectation or alignment with the concept of nuclear war or using nuclear bombs to solve human problems. We have gotten to the level of insanity and visible insanity in nation state politics, where we are now seeing like that guy over there actually has a bomb and he would actually drop it to like solve a problem. And the rest of us, we do not deserve to bear the end results of that, because like nuclear stuff causes giant rips in the fabric of space-time. It has bad impact on DNA. It is a destabilizer of the fabric of space-time and consciousness. So there's not a way to be like let that crazy world leader drop a nuclear bomb over there. It won't have an impact on me at all. It will have a giant impact on you. So it's not even fair to say like if someone dropped a nuclear bomb, it would of course impact the entire ecosystem. It wouldn't just be in one little area of the world. It goes around the whole entire world, and it affects all human DNA, but also whales and dolphins and the ladybug on the strawberry outside of my window. All of these things get horribly affected. And so when you get to something that is one person's insane decision that has an impact on all of us as organisms and organizations, that is when it's time for you to make the inside into the outside. Externalize your inner desire to have a pristine world, not a radiation world, and make sure that you make that as your thought form in the world. Many of us, even just one of us, being like, no, I do not consent. You may not drop a nuclear bomb. That changes the world. So you're undergoing planetary ascension. The inside becomes the outside. With flying rainbow lasagna, the inside becomes the outside. You must start to, there's really a pressure on each one of us to start to supersede the externalizations of insane people who would externalize either their own self-destruction or their paroxysm, their need for catharsis to see everything be destroyed because they themselves should not be in existence. Some organisms literally know that they shouldn't be here. They are the end result of like some friction or flotsam, jetsam, and consciousness debris. And they're like, everybody, like, take me out of my misery, like, get me out of here. And they should go out of existence. They should not be here draining or inhibiting the rest of us. And your entropy, your sending them to entropy helps that to happen. So that would look like a vestigial, the best way to say it is like something becomes vestigial or irrelevant or obsolete. As you drain energy away from something, the person no longer moves through time, the organism is no longer getting paid or existing in reality, and it no longer has an impact on time. What does that look like? Like if a person is no longer moving through time, their DNA gets frozen. They no longer move forward. Like if this lip gloss is no longer moving through time, you see it at 421 and then all of a sudden, boop, it disappears. It does not exist at 422. This is the level of, I guess you would say, like magic or transportive, transcendent directness that you can expect to experience in the world. And it's very, very different from a sense of like, torment or continual suffering in some type of a hellish thing. Okay, so now I want to talk about hyperspace, because when I show you the drawing of this becoming this, what we're really doing is taking this and putting it in a context. So initially, when they talk about the Big Bang, there's just a dot, and then the dot expands into a bubble, and it's just a bubble with the potential around it. There's not stuff around it. The stuff that is potential is the future and is not yet defined as stuff. And in order for it to be stuff that you can experience, you have to put the bubble of time in a room or in a box. And that is called hyperspace. So if we talk about this, there's just this as a type of time bubble that has an inner vortex and it's flowing in figure-8 patterns, but it doesn't have anything around it that you can say, now we've moved up relative to something else, moved down relative to something else. If you create the room that is around this, it's called hyperspace. And then when you move this up and down in hyperspace, you are creating the flying rainbow lasagna. You have to add that as the higher dimension, which is the muscle power of your mind. Just like when you use the muscle power of your perception to see the optical illusion as both an old woman or a young. You use the power of your mind. You use the power of your mind already to tie together one frozen moment at 4:01 to 4:02 to 4:03. You start to use the integumentive power of your mind to create a context around this time shape, and then to start to move it up and down relative to that time shape. Okay, I think that I got to everything that is important. Your brains are mostly liquefied. Some of the things that I want to emphasize are moving the flying rainbow lasagna up and down in non-random patterns means that you blend together realities non-randomly. So you're going to blend for the optimum realities. Maybe on one layer of reality, you married this girl, but on another layer, you married this girl. And when you fly rainbow lasagna, you bring together the aspects of yourself that are the best of these different life experiences. Here you learned about this, and here you learned about that, and you put them both together into the end result of your soul. Or like saying, okay, let's talk about the extraneous parallel realities that exist to the left and right of the main realities in this sculpture. Say, why would we even have these superfluous existences surrounding the path of ascended mastery? And the answer is that those are all supportive structures that add up to reality. There are qualitative differences in experience, but not necessarily right and wrong. But when I talk to you about that, I don't want for each of you to think that that equates to um, a contextless moral continuum where you're like, we're beyond right and wrong, and therefore anything is allowed. This is what some of the most flawed and evil people in your world promote as a form of self-protection from responsibility. They're like, evil schmeevil, I can do whatever I want. I'm like, no, evil schmeevil. There's a big difference between something that is life affirming and something that is overtly evil. And how do you determine what these qualities are? Not by having an orthodoxy written in a book that says this is the recipe for what it is to be good. And if you don't do this, then you are necessarily evil. It is to question whether something brings you towards the central timelines that bring you in connection and restoration to divinity or away. That's it. That's the only thing. And of course, this becomes something that cannot be estimated according to your five senses. You must have your higher senses to be able to be literate and make this assessment. But once you are literate and you can tell, does something bring you closer to infinity? Does it make you accelerate more towards light speed? Or does it make you feel more friction, slow you down, or even make you be frozen on the membrane of death? If something makes you slower or frozen, it is not life affirming and not something that you should be experiencing. Of course, I speak to everybody who's in this class, but now I'm going to confuse you as we're almost at the door. And I'm just going to confuse you with your liquefied brains because some people are being good by moving towards entropy. Let's talk about like President Trump, a big giant piece of doo-doo, someone who has no redeeming values, right? They should go to entropy. And when they slow down and move away from life and vivification, they are actually doing the right thing. They are moving away from life and towards destruction or non-being. But we want them not to drag us down. So if they're supposed to get sicker and corrode more and fall apart more, let them. They should be like, hooray, good job corroding away and falling apart. You're not supposed to be in reality, fall apart faster. And same thing, so that's with a person. Apologies, like I'm talking about President Trump. Like, I hope no FBI agents come after me for this. Just fictionally, we're just fictionally talking about him as an example. But let's talk about an organization, like some screwed up organization, some secret society that is not very good, or maybe it once was good, but now it's very devolved and bad. We'd want for it to go into its de-evolution and corruption as fast as possible. You don't want it to be like, well, like maybe it'll stay together for the next 5 years, or like a company or something like that, a government or a company. You'd want to be like, wow, that thing is really screwed up. It's a bad company that makes a bad product. I hope they go bankrupt tomorrow. I hope that they stop having employees, that the CEO loses his job, they lose all their stock market holdings, and that they all stop making whatever evil poison, like glyphosate or something like that, that they have been making for a long time. Got it? This is what it is to send something to entropy. So you should celebrate when you send something to entropy. It is the de-energizing of something that should experience that, but other people might have qualms. And maybe they're like, wait, I like my stock market portfolio. I don't want it to go to entropy, but it's like they were evil and you don't want to keep momentum going with that. So you should philosophically celebrate when things that are matter and energy that are not moving at the right rate or in the right place, when they go to entropy. And as you start to have a confidence in your own spiritual, artistic nature, you should gain confidence to know who and what should go to entropy and what things should be preserved. And this is an aesthetic choice. Like when we're painting at the masterpiece of reality, some things are very obviously, like here I have a pencil with an eraser. Oops, some things are very obviously like, that's bad doo-doo. Erase that, erase that, erase that. We don't like that at all. But then some things are more of an aesthetic choice where you're like, that looks partially good. It doesn't look that great or whatever. And you have to make an artistic choice, like make this part a little bit different, make this part a little bit different, erase this part. So your application of the concept of entropy is always going to be your own personal, artistic, or flair. And that there, of course, there are hard edge math rules that you apply to this, but in the world of experienced reality, you might make judgment calls or do things that are according to your own aesthetics. And you should start to become comfortable with that. Like if I'm like, yeah, I find glyphosate to be aesthetically non-pleasing. So there are reasons for this. There are very real reasons. I hope you guys always sense with the things that I think are not life affirming. Okay, so here's a good question. And Becca says, are other timelines vivified with a part of our consciousness, or other timelines are just potentials but not being lived, if that makes sense? It makes sense, and it's a great question. So thank you for being such an excellent student. It gives us an opportunity to go even a little bit deeper. Some timelines we live upon, and our sentience or alive consciousness went down that road where you're like, here's me, I go down this road, and I'm like, dead end. That was not a good road. I better go back to the beginning and then try a different road. Some timelines are just potentials that you never have to explore. And that is important to comprehend. You are not required to play every wrong note of the symphony before you finally get to the right notes. You should jump over some realities as not good realities to explore. So you're like, do I want to eat broken glass and poison for breakfast? No, I do not. Those are easily edited versions of reality. Jump over a broken glass, jump over that. But how about then you get to like food products, you're like, glyphosate covered oats. Do I want to eat that? You're like, no, jump over it. It's not as bad as broken glass, but it's definitely not optimum. And then you get to something where it's like, here's the timeline that I actually want to be on. So as you become more wealthy, where's my diamonds, darling? As you become more wealthy and you can see and sense the future with your huge, expensive diamonds, darling, you can make great choices about which levels of reality you want to vivify and experience and which you want to skip completely. I am very clear about the things that I want to skip completely. I'm like, jump over that one. That's a pile of crap. That's a pile of crap. That's a pile of crap. And I'm going towards this timeline exclusively. So there are certain substances where it's non-negotiable, as I would like to say. Like, I will definitely not be eating that for breakfast. Some people that I will not be interacting with. I'm like, get out of my energy field, not interacting with you. And some life directions that I will simply non-negotiable, not going to go in that direction. So for me, the versions of my life, like if we're looking at the version of your life that you're on, some things I'm already very clear on. Like, never going to make that choice, never going to make that choice, never, never, never. That brings me to here, where I have some options. I already said to you, like, you're going to marry maybe 17 people in your life, not however many billions of people exist in the world. There's limited number of breakfasts that you will consent to, or marriages that you will consent to, or jobs that you will consent to. And I think it's important for you to claim ownership of that and be like, in my own choices, in my life, in my own boundaries, there are some things that are a non-starter. Like, I'm never going to do that. Never going to get that job. Never going to do that. Never going to marry that person. The sooner you get to that level of personal authenticity with your own relationship with time, better your life gets. The less compromising you become with your own life journey, the better your life gets. And you you leap over bull doo-doos. You leap over non-optimum circumstances. So please know, you are not in a deterministic or fate-ruled world. You are in charge of your own life. Other people or non-optimum organisms or something like that will offer you bad choices. You are not obliged to say yes to bad choices. And you can always either say no to those choices, or if you don't like anything on the menu, this is the ultimate, and this is what I will complete our class on for today. You flying rainbow lasagne. When you look on the menu of life and you're like, I don't like any of these choices, I don't like any of these potential marriage partners, products for breakfast, or directions that my life can go. What do? You don't just jump off a cliff or something like that. Eat cupcakes for breakfast. You flying rainbow lasagna, and that is to create a new potential. Like, I don't like anything on the menu. This all seems bad. Create a new option, which is flying rainbow lasagna. And when you do that, even if it opens the door a tiny crack, like a little bit of potential, then you can go on to a better timeline. And then from that better timeline, you then lasagna again. And you're like, huh, now look at that. Now I made an even more optimized future for myself. We are in that level where we are being forced to optimize our pathway because there are so many negative and malformed leaders and, either business leaders, political leaders, or religious thought leaders that are all moving into profound levels of either self-destruction or planetary destruction. You have to flying rainbow lasagna at this moment. So as with anything, and I'll definitely get into when I talk about one of my classes from years ago, I said, in the worst circumstances, what do you do? Flying rainbow lasagna. Like we'll always affirm that, and I'll always go into the particulars of that. But please know, when you seem to be at the end of a path, if it doesn't seem like there's anything else you can do and you don't like any of the options, you don't have to die or give up. That is when you should flying rainbow lasagna. And you should even flying rainbow lasagna before it becomes a sense of desperation. You should flying rainbow lasagna in comfort before it becomes an impending crisis. And so this is what I do. I flying rainbow lasagna. I try to every day that my body is comfortable and that I'm able to do it, and or make myself available to it every day. And by doing that, incrementally shifting always towards the better reality structures. So that we'll end on that. There's always something that you can do in your own life, but also in all of our collective experience. So we need to shift towards the reality structures where we do a giant purging, cleaning house of anything that is supposed to go in the trash. If something is supposed to go in the trash, a person, a characteristic, or a way of doing things, put it in the trash now. Let's get this over with so that those of us who have potential can keep going. And some of the things that go in the trash are like the old ways of doing business, the old ways of structuring the economy, the old ways of doing war, the old insane concept of nuclear war, and also a lot of the old ways that the nation states do interaction with each other, protection of their borders, doing of war, and other things like that. These are all outdated paradigms that are ready to go into the trash heap of history, and then you are ready to do something new. So I know that when we do class, I'm always like, okay, good job. Having class under extreme duress with a lot of crazy things going on, but I always try to make it relevant. We're not just like playing the same classical music over and over without recognizing the context has changed. Under an extreme duress right now, meaning like you have to create a better timeline so that way you don't hit the membrane of death. And I look at this as like an ultimate joy, a freedom where I'm like, I don't like any of these recipes. I will cook for me. I will cook for something. I will make something better. I'll make something up. That's the level of reality that we are in right now. Like you aren't being given very many good options on the menu. And there's a lot of insane people that are pretty much going into a self-destruction end of their consciousness. But it is up to you as an individual, or those of us who are sane and who have a viable potential for the future, to be like, I'm going to make something different and better. I will make it for me and for my loved ones and for other people who are prepared to flying rainbow lasagna into better directions. Okay. So I think that's a good point to end on. All right, good. Throw your books and pencils in the air. You all liquefied your brains. You did a lot of heavy lifting. The concept of hyperspace is in and of itself a worthy concept for you to try to think about and embody. If you can't fall asleep at night, just try and think about hyperspace in the room that contains the room. I think it'll be very good for you. Okay, good. So I will wrap things up. Oh, Joyce is beautiful. She says, thank you, Professor. I'm grateful and appreciate you. Hugs to Cheeky too. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a lovely student of my class and for being so consistent and for being so intelligent in the things that you say and share with us here. I'm very, very grateful to everybody who's in this class. Truly, I don't spend time and energy on the people that are supposed to go to Entropy. Like, let them go, slow down and go down the drain. Very, very happy to add energy to each one of you so that way you guys can get energized. And Elmer also says thank you. And Pedro says, love lasagna. Thank you, Pedro. I know you're not always here during our class. I know you have stuff going on, but I'm always appreciative of the acronyms that you've given us for many, many years. All right. So thank you for that participation. All right. So please, everybody, do practice your flying rainbow lasagna, whether you do the dance or whether you do it on a genetic and consciousness-based level. Really have to get moving on your creating of better recipes for the future, not to make you feel destabilized or under pressure. But I think that it's true. Sometimes as a musician or an artist, you have to know like you're under pressure and you have to give a good performance. So everybody get going, bake some good stuff. Joni says brain smoothie. Your brain is liquefied, girl. Throw your books and pencils up. You all have to relieve the pressure. Okay, good. So do something fun. Good job. Thank you, everyone.